We'd like to welcome you to our current event and Bible study for March 20th, 2017. Today we're just going to be covering kind of a myriad of different current events. A lot of these things could definitely be impacting our lives very, very shortly and are impacting our lives right now, even though we're not even aware of it. And I'm going to be playing some clips where a lot of things that they're going to be mentioning, I mean, it's just mind-blowing that I didn't even know was going on. I keep learning more stuff. Like the Bible says, in the end times, knowledge shall increase, and that's really what we're seeing right now. And we're also learning about a lot of the nefarious plans that have been foisted upon us for sometimes decades, and that we might not have been aware of previously. So there's like this big grand revealing that seems to be going on. There's a lot with the pedophilia and all of just the wickedness that is being perpetuated in high places and in high government and in Hollywood and these types of things. It's just mind-boggling. Just more stuff to pray about. The first report is entitled "Illegal Border Crossings Down 40%, but totally non-vetted diseased refugees obtaining social security numbers and passports upon arrival in the U.S. by plane and under cover of night." So while we've got illegal border crossings down 40% since Trump came into office, we still have an absolute influx, and this is all through the United Nations. They're the ones that are behind this. They're the ones bringing these devils in, and we're going to be talking about that today. It's an interview that Josh Tolley just did, and it confirms so many of the other studies that I've done upon this subject, that this isn't stuff that we're just talking about that has no merit or basis of fact. More and more verifiable by the week, essentially. Josh Tolley posted a disturbing video on YouTube this past week. In the video, Josh interviews a woman from Missouri, and we're going to be listening to that, who explains how refugees are flown in at night and given social security numbers and passports completely non-vetted. Now, these aren't refugees. These are Muslim men of fighting age, most of them from Syria, that are carrying all kinds of diseases and are bent literally on jihad, holy war, Muslim holy war, and killing the infidels. I mean, that's what their whole stated goal is. And they're literally doing everything they can do to bring these devils in under the cover of night and not vet them on purpose, by design. And this is going on essentially every night in different airports and in different ways they're bringing them in across the nation. I've talked about the buses that come across the border with the blacked out windows. They're white buses, so that would be more of like a UN thing, you would think, as well. They fly them in. They bring them in on UPS cargo planes. And then what they do is they have all these different, quote, religious 501c3 religious organizations in America that have contracted with the United Nations in order to bring them in order to get them to their destination, and in order to get them housing, and in order to get them everything they need for free. Housing, clothing, food, all of this the American taxpayer is paying for. Now, I've talked about this before. I've given all the evidence before. This is just going to give a whole other level and layer to the types of atrocities that are being committed. And they're literally being brought in to kill us. That's literally the real goal of all of this. The end game is to have that fifth column Trojan horse insurgency already in place on our soil for when things go hot. They're going to activate these devils, all these Islamic terror cells that have been here, all the Black Lives Matter, all the illegal drug cartels in Mexico, all the stuff they're doing right now with the Cal Exit movement in California, all of these, all the Russian troops that are on our soil, all the Chinese troops that are already on our soil, how they control the ports, all of these things are going to be activated at a future date when Satan evidently gives the green light for this stuff to go hot. And they're already going to be in place. So they realize that America is the most highly armed nation ever in the history of mankind. So they also realize they have to put in place a very, very large contingency of evil devils in order to annihilate the Americans. So this is what's going on here. And we've talked a lot about this lately. This is just going to give, like I said, a whole other level of confirmation. The woman started attending meetings last year. This is the woman he's interviewing. I don't know if they ever give her name for whatever, but I mean, you can see her. I mean, maybe they do give her name. I don't know. Anyway, she started attending meetings last year sponsored by the Missouri Social Services that are under the auspices of the UN Refugee Resettlement Organization. They're not bringing in any Christians, okay? The Christians are left in Syria and in these third world, basically hellholes, in order that they'll be killed. Okay, and that includes the Yazidis and the Coptic Christians and a lot of other people that may be like, you know, they would just lump in with Christians that aren't really like, you know, I would say a Bible believing type of Christian. They've got a lot of their weird belief systems commingled in there. For Islam, and I really don't think it matters that much, as long as they're not Islamic, as long as there's any Christian bent to them especially, they are a target. They are the avowed enemy of Islam. That's how Islam views them. And they're there to subjugate, for the women to rape, well, for little boys too. Steal, kill, generally mutilate, I mean, you name it, we have no rights, no nothing. So they'll bring over the Syrian Muslim terrorist men of fighting age. They'll bring over the same ones from Somalia, the wickedest of the wicked. Those are the same ones that are marching into Germany and into Europe. Those are the ones they're letting in. They're making the Christians stay behind. They don't have any rights, the Christians. They're left behind for the slaughter, for the other Muslims to clean up. So they're sending in the worst dregs and most demon-possessed devils on the face of the planet in order to take us out. The Christians over here. And anybody that would be of any kind of lawful bent. Patriot movement, whatever you want to call them. Pro-Second Amendment, pro-life. Anybody that has any type of righteous inclination. That's what they're here for. And they're trying to get as many of them in as they can. Trump is being fought every single step of the way. Every single thing he's trying to do is being fought. They blocked his travel ban again. We're going to talk about that in a second. He tried to reinstitute the travel ban on like what's the six most worst countries there are that bring in the most terrorists where they're not being vetted. It was a very benign thing. It was like the very least of what should be being done. They're blocking that. Every single thing he's trying to do in any kind of righteous way, and I don't mean that because I think he's perfect. I'm saying anything he's trying to do, though, that has any kind of righteous bent to it, they are fighting him tooth and nail, and that is a fact. Doesn't mean I'm not saying he could turn out to be whatever. But I'm telling you right now, I'm just looking at what they're doing. The whole mainstream media is 100% ganged up and geared up against him. The Congress and the Senate and all these guys are trying to resist him as much as possible. And he's trying to fight this gigantic panopticon of the New World Order, and it is resisting him every step of the way. So he's having a hard time, even though he has done a lot of things since he's been in office. I mean, way more than Obama. That's for sure. I mean, I just read something this morning. I'll just read that to you. First 2 months in office, Trump reduces U.S. debt by $100 billion, whereas Obama, in his first 2 months, increased the debt by $400 billion. Okay, that's just one stat out there. Next, this is just some headlines from this week. Trump gets trade win at G20 meeting. Top economies yield to the USA. Now there's bids coming in to begin building the border wall. Illegal border crossings down 40%. You know, and it's like, okay, well, I mean, I really, you know, listen, if the guy was doing a whole bunch of evil, I'd be here screaming the loudest. You know, I'd be, but I'm not going to scream that Trump's the bane of all society or the bane of the world when I see these types of things coming in. Bottom line, the whole world system hates the guy and is fighting him tooth and nail and demonizing him and his family tooth and nail and any of his appointees. And again, with the whole pedophile gate, trying to bring that down. I got into that last week. But I would say if anybody needs our prayers, it's Trump and any of the righteous people he's got in positions, or any of the righteous people in government at this point, and in the military, and I mean worldwide, that God would, bless them and empower them and protect them and their families, and, because I'm telling you, they are out for blood. Lindsey Graham announces Congress is going to go after Trump for anything and everything. The littlest nitpicky thing they're trying to get, it's stuff that, Obama did 1,000 times worse that they never said one thing about when he was in office. Trump will get it 400 times for doing something totally insignificant, or anybody in his cabinet. That's what I'm seeing. Every time I can't even go up to CNN. It's just demonization of Trump or anybody in his cabinet, and it's mind-boggling. It's so obvious what is actually going on. And then I'm going to get into this, but this week, Obama makes a surprise visit to Hawaii 48 hours before the same judge that he appointed, that he graduated from Harvard with, at the same class in Harvard, his buddy, this guy he appointed in Hawaii, Obama. Obama makes a surprise visit to Hawaii 48 hours before the same judge blocks Trump travel ban again for the second time. Obama was within minutes of the judge during the Honolulu trip. 48 hours before he blocked this travel ban that I talked about, which is the bare minimum of what needs to start happening. They don't want this to happen. They want the most wicked, evil devils from Islam pouring into this country, staging and waiting for jihad. And in the meantime, they're going to give them every single thing that they need. And they're not going to keep track of them. They're not going to vet them. They don't care. Our government that's in position from the Obama regime is so wicked, so evil, so corrupt, it defies the imagination. Judge said that blocking the new immigration order is unprecedented and judicial overreach. Donald Trump responded to the federal judge in Hawaii who froze his latest executive order, restricting immigration just hours before it was supposed to go into effect. This happens every day, though. Every single day. They're fighting him. They're blocking him. They're doing everything they can do to demonize the guy. Every single day. SNL just did that skit the other night where he said that Alex Jones, what's his name? Alec Baldwin was acting like he was Trump, and he said Alex Jones was the one that told me that blacks are aliens or something, and that all black people aren't human, basically. And they're doing all this stuff to try to create race wars between the whites and the blacks, to make blacks hate whites and whites be on the absolute total defensive because we're we're the bane of all existence, evidently, because we're white. Just telling you, that's how Hollywood portrays things. If you're white, you're stupid, and you're the cause of all slavery, and you're this and you're that, and you need to die. Essentially, so much of what is going on the college campuses echoes that. I've seen enough reports come in. I mean, it is unbelievable what is going on. I mean, it just defies. I probably should actually talk about this because I've already brought this up, and then I'll come back to what I was going to talk about. Now, bear this in mind, this information, think about this information when we hear this interview that I'm going to be playing. So a ruling by a federal judge in Hawaii that blocked President Trump's travel ban was announced less than 48 hours after Barack Obama made a surprise visit to Honolulu. Imagine that. Hours before Trump's travel ban on individuals from the 6 worst Muslim countries, most terrorist-prone Muslim countries, was set to go into effect yesterday. This is the one they already blocked before. The one that Hollywood and every liberal devil on the planet was screaming and crying bloody murder for when it went into effect. U.S. District Court Judge Derek Watson, who presides in Honolulu, slapped down the policy, citing Trump's comments on Muslims during the presidential campaign as part of the reason for blocking the ban. Watson was nominated by Obama to the position in November of 2012, having graduated from Harvard Law School in the same year as Obama. Hey, one hand's got to wash the other, right? Come on. You do me a favor, I'll do you. Scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. As the Honolulu Star reported, Obama made an unannounced return to Hawaii Monday. just 3 months after his last official holiday visit as president, arriving with a small entourage that included Secret Service detail. It's wonderful to think that our tax dollars are still protecting that devil. Eagle-eyed Reddit users noted that Obama had dinner at the Noai Thai restaurant, which is just minutes away from the courthouse, and that Obama was likely within 5 minutes of this same judge's house at one point in the drive over. Pop star reports that Obama played golf, but was still, quote, still making time to take care of business. Oh yeah, he took care of a lot of business, evidently, with his judge. As he met with tech leaders. So this goes to show you how important this Muslim issue is. Think about Europe. Think about what's going on there in Europe, in Germany, in Sweden, and how the Muslims have basically, just ruined these whole countries just about already, to a large extent. Maybe not every area, but to a large extent. The rapes are almost exclusively Muslim men that Muslim terrorist men that have been basically brought in, unvetted. The rapes of white women, that's who they go after. They're self-admitted. All the statistics prove that. Look at what they're doing everywhere they go, spreading their wonderful ideology, their wonderful religious system. But we just need to be more tolerant. See, that's my whole problem. I'm not tolerant enough. This is on me. I really believe that. Because obviously they're wonderful people. We just need to embrace them a little harder. And maybe they'll stop being the devils that they are if we just embrace them a little harder. Try a little more. Bring a few more million of them in. Do you know that Islam just surpassed Christianity as the #1 religion in the world, like in the last week? Yeah. So now they outnumber people that would identify as Christians. They literally outnumber them. And that's what they said they're going to do. They're going to breed us out of existence. Not only are they going to breed with their 19 wives that they've got at home, who've all been generally mutilated, and they'll generally mutilate their little girls and subjugate and make them wear beekeeper outfits. Really wonderful life for a woman. If I was a woman, I'd be, where do I sign up? What's not to like about this? Will you beat me too? Well, sure, I'll beat you. And subjugate you. And treat you like garbage. Women are viewed lower than dogs in Islam. They're viewed lower than dogs. Okay? So where are all the social justice warriors crying out, all the feminazis crying out against all of the atrocities just from a female treatment standpoint in Islam? No, there's none. You know why? Because deep down, all these people love evil. They love evil. If you're a feminazi, if you're a social justice warrior, deep down, I really believe there's a part of you that just likes evil. And you look at Islam and there's demons in you and there's demons in Islam that identify with one another. And they're like, yeah, we're simpatico. We're good. You're evil, I'm evil. We're good. Even though if they were in power, they would kill you, lop off your head while they're raping your daughters. I'm not talking about my listeners. I'm talking about people in general that these people that want to bring more Muslims in and won't look at any of the facts at all. Don't confuse me with the facts. My mind's made up, is what they'll tell you. They'll scream at you. They'll threaten you. They'll spit in your face. They'll punch you. They'll beat you, but they will not debate you because they cannot debate on merit. They can't. They have no leg to stand on whatsoever. They're mental morons or midgets, whatever you want to call them. These are the people that want to bring more and more of these. And you just look at what they're doing wherever they go and wherever they're unleashed. And you can understand why it would be so important for a literal, just like an ex-president who's only been out of office for however, a couple months or whatever, a few months, for him to literally fly to Honolulu to strong-arm this judge he appointed that he had graduated with from Harvard into blocking this travel ban again. And it's not even like probably a ton of people are coming in on planes from these 6 countries. But they don't want that stream to stop at all. It's the same reason we have open borders, or have had open borders, and now they realize that's the border wall, the border crossings are down 40%. Okay, we have got to at least make sure that we're up in our game here with the United Nations, bringing these ones in and coordinated with these 501c3 religious organizations, Catholics, Lutherans, Presbyterians, all these other, and I've got into them in the past, giving you the statistics on it, so that they can amalgamate and assimilate them into our society, and then they disappear. They just disappear, and we don't know where they go. But they're still using those cards that they're given. She's going to talk about it here. So they can still get their money, and they can still get all their bills and expenses paid. So they don't have to worry about any of that. We're paying that bill for them. So we're literally funding our own destruction with the tax system now. We're literally funding our own destruction when you pay into it. That's our government. So Obama's, quote, he said he's, quote, still making time to take care of business, end of quote, regarding this Honolulu visit. Oh, I bet you, devil. And you're going to burn in hell white hot. White hot, Obama. He said he met with tech leaders and that his return, his, quote, return to politics might be sooner than we think. Well, he's never left. He's got his compound 2 miles away from the White House, where he's got Valerie Jarrett living, Eric Holder, another one of his henchmen, and all of these social justice warriors and Black Lives Matters and all these other movements, Soros sponsored and funded movements, all ready to go hot whenever they give the order. And most likely it's going to start going down in the spring when the weather warms up, and they're going to have all of these mass protests, and they're going to try to get the old Civil War kicked off. They start activating these terror cells that they've already got, these Islamic terror cells. Well, it's going to happen, sooner rather than later. I hope that doesn't happen, but I'm saying that is their plan. Other headlines just from this week read, Trudeau, the Canadian president, gives preference to Islam over all other religions in Canada. So now they get preferential treatment now, which is the way it will be here if it's not already. They're literally getting, other religions are now inferior. Okay? Islam has absolute authority and preference over all of the religions in Canada now. The most wicked, evil, black death cult on the planet. Of course it's going to get the position of eminence over all the other. It's wicked, it's evil. Of course. Here's another headline. U of T professor says, it is not radical to support the caliphate, the Muslim caliphate, or the Sharia law. It's not radical. It's what we should all be doing. That's the goal. Absolutely. Another one. Teacher quits after Muslim primary school students threaten to behead her. Government does nothing. They can do whatever they want. Threaten whatever they want to do. And if they do kill a whole bunch of people, they'll just sweep it under the rug. They won't even mention the fact it was all Muslims doing it. Another one. Muslim gang pummels young Danish couple for eating a ham pizza. This was in their home country. Another one. This one's lovely. 1,500 acid attacks have been recorded in London since 2011. So 6 years. 1,500 women, typically, almost every time, that get acid thrown in their face, which totally mangles their face and disfigures them. I forget to mention this one. For life, because some maggot devil Muslim got offended because she either spurned him or did something that they didn't like. So they'll come up to you when you're not expecting it, throw a whole thing of acid in your face, and say, have a nice day. Have a nice life. Living, try to find a whatever, man or whatever. So they want to make sure you suffer the rest of your life. That's how sick and sadistic these devils are. And they don't mention one time in this report that any of these attacks were by Muslims, when they all are. Not one time did they mention it. Some comments from that particular report One comment read, acid attacks, female genital mutilations, forced marriages, child marriages, Sharia courts, etc., etc. Britain is so progressive. Another one read, yep, it's not even, and not to even, let's not even mention immigration as though it has no bearing on acid attacks. And again, it has everything to do with the acid. If you didn't have these Muslims here, there would be no acid attacks. Who even thinks to do something like that? You know? Disfigure a woman for the rest of her life? Who thinks to do something like that? And then another comment read, see how Britain has been culturally enriched by diversity? See, that's what we need to be more diverse. We need more of this. And yet, the left are so full of devils and demons. They'll scream at you and how dare Trump try to stop. I mean, and these are the 6 worst nations that don't vet anybody at all. And he's just trying to keep them out temporarily. And he's a demon from the pit of hell for doing that. You know, I don't care if it was him or anyone else doing it. I would defend that these people need to not be here. And the ones that are here need to be gone. They are here for our destruction. That is the only reason they're here. Let's go ahead and listen to this interview. This is a amazing interview, and it's just mind-blowing.
Hey everybody, Josh Tully here from the Josh Tully Show. What you're about to see is an interview with a woman who sat in and was part of the UN Refugee Resettlement Program. And this interview's...
Okay, sorry, I switched my speakers out here. I got a complaint about the audio. So I'm going to try to switch over to these types of speakers, and maybe we'll get a little bit better audio quality, and it won't be such a big difference between me talking and the interview. So let's see how this works out here.
And this interview is going to alarm many of you, so I'm going to tell you right now, be prepared with a pen and paper to take notes. You're going to want to call your congressmen, governors, representatives, and anybody else you can find, because this is going to make you mad. Just warning you.
Transmission begins.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
This is the Josh Tully Show on the GCN Radio Network.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. Why are we here today?
Well, Josh, I've recently been attending some UN refugee resettlement meetings.
Okay.
And I started attending those last year, and I've uncovered some things that I thought were disturbing. And
before we get into what you uncovered, did the UN actually sponsor these meetings, or are these just UN refugees and some other organization sponsoring the meeting?
the meetings are sponsored by the Missouri Social Services.
Okay.
They host the meetings, but the meetings are under the auspices of the UN Refugee Resettlement Organization, the Office of Refugee Monitoring out of Washington, D.C.
Okay. So you attend these meetings, you get in, what did you find?
Well, initially, I was really curious about how they seemed to be so casual. It just struck me as curious how casual they were about the number of people that they were bringing into the state of Missouri, and how they were being brought in and where they were going and the conditions under which they were being brought in. And so, you know, I was kind of taken aback, actually, by some of the things they were saying. Took a lot of notes, you know, and just, you know, thought at the time, how come I'm the only one in the room? When I looked around the room to see if any of this information was registering on the faces of the people in the room, it surprised me that they were all just very casual about it. I think I was the only person in the room that was disturbed by this information.
So the people in the room, what were they doing? What were they being briefed on?
Well, there were different agencies that
Okay.
attend, and they have to attend these meetings. They're quarterly meetings, and so they are required to attend. So there were people there from St. Louis and Columbia and Springfield and Kansas City, and they were there as a requirement of their contract with not only Social Services, but the Office of Refugee Management, Office of Refugee Monitoring.
So the audience is going to say, well, what's the problem with this? I mean, we allow refugees, we vet the refugees, they're coming in, that's that's a peaceful thing, right?
Okay, in 1980, President Jimmy Carter changed the way that we receive refugees, immigrants, and asylees, and they're all categorized differently. And so in 1980, the act was the Immigration and Refugee Act. It was changed. Now, the refugees that came into Missouri starting in starting in October, from October till mid-February, we had already received 34,000 of the 50,000 that was.
All right.
And President Trump dropped the number back down to 50,000. Now, I know a lot of people, it was reported in the media, a lot of people were very angry with President Trump that he dropped the number down. But he was well within his purview legally to do that.
Sure.
Because he did not see a crisis that merited keeping that 110,000 ceiling. So he reduced it back down to 50,000. We had already received 34,000 and some change by mid-February, and so I believe his plan was to slow it down even further, which he did do, because we have from now till September, you see.
Sure.
So we're already at 65% of the total if we go with the 50,000 limit.
What's interesting about that, though, is even...
I mean, it needs to be zero. I mean, unless they're bringing in Christians, who are the ones that are being persecuted, it needs to be zero. These are like Muslim men fighting age that they're bringing in, the vast majority, with no other women. So, I mean, that's an absolute recipe for disaster. Just look at Germany, look at Sweden, look at the rape statistics. You know, just not of women, but of like little children, little boys. I mean, they're savages. These people are savages. I'm going to be the most politically incorrect person when it comes to this subject, and I really don't care. Because I look at the fruit of a tree, and these people are savages, okay?
So Obama raised the limit. Republican Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, he okayed raising it to over 300,000. So this isn't really Democrat versus Republican.
Right.
This is an issue larger than the two parties at play.
That's right. Many people, including myself, believe that this is an intentional device used to invade the United States of America.
Wow. So if it is an intentional use to get refugees in, whether it's an invasion or not, we'll get to that in a minute. But if they are trying to bring people in, they're bringing in the safest, best people, right? Because the progressive media tells us all the time that these people are well vetted, they've had their health checkups, they're good to go, just bring them on in.
Actually, they are not vetted, and they are not the safest people. We're being told through mainstream media that they are going from 12 to 18 months worth of vetting, but in the meetings that I have attended, I learned that there was no vetting done at all. Ooh. They were literally given plane tickets and put on a plane right away within 24 hours. And they were put on the plane with the clothes on their back. Many of them come into country diseased. They come in with tuberculosis, leprosy, HIV, giardia, smallpox, polio, communicable diseases. Apart from giardia, which is a parasite, they're coming in with communicable diseases, highly contagious diseases.
You know, just to back that up, we had a guest on the show.
I mean, again, this is one other aspect I kind of fail to even mention most of the time. How literally, not only are they bringing in all the devils and demons associated with their devil-demon religion and worship of the moon god Allah, not only are they bringing in that type of demonic spiritual baggage, but they're literally bringing in all of these different diseases into this country. Non-vet, they're not vetting them in any. They're not vetting their health. They're not vetting them to see if they're terrorists. In fact, I'm convinced the worst of the worst is what they really want here. They want the most diseased. They want the most pedophilic. They want the most demon-possessed Muslims they can get here. That's what their goal is, because they know that you bring enough of these devils in, and bad things are going to really happen. I mean, they know, and this is the whole goal.
She's a doctor from one of the major hospitals in New York City, and she's trying to sound the alarm bell just from that perspective. She has no political bent, but just from a health perspective, she was saying, wait a second, the pathogens and viruses these people are bringing in completely unchecked is a health hazard to the entire country.
Right, right.
So let me get this straight. So they're bringing them in completely unvetted and unchecked, but that means they're probably women and children who are about to get shot or something, right? Kind of like the last scene out of Vietnam, where we're just bringing in whoever can get their kid on the helicopter. It's probably all women and children, correct?
No, that is incorrect. That's what the mainstream media is telling us. They're telling us that it's primarily women and children. They're pulling on the heartstrings of the American people. We're a very compassionate people. And so knowing that, they pull on the heartstrings of the public, and they swoon the public over to this idea that we are actually saving the lives of women and children. The vast majority of the refugees that we've received here in Missouri have been males between the ages of 15 and upwards toward 40, 45 years old.
So it's similar to what we've seen in Europe then,
Yeah.
where initially
Fighting
they
age
said
men.
these refugees coming in were women and children. Even the UN admitted over 70% of them were fighting age males from 15 to 55, and the women and children were nowhere to be seen.
Right, that's right. Now, I will say that...
So the most dangerous elements from a demographic standpoint regarding Islam you could bring in 15 to 44. It's the time of a man's life where he has the most potential to be the most dangerous, essentially, and that's what they're bringing in.
We have had some women and children. Recently, a load came into Kansas City about mid-February. One of the last groups of refugees that we received were Congolese. They were Christians, and a church from Sedalia actually picked them up from the airport and greeted them. And
This must have been one of like the 0.02% of Christians that they actually bring in out of the 100% Muslim or the 99.7% percent Muslim population they bring in. They've got to bring in some token Christians every now and then, evidently.
sponsored them. And so those refugees came. They were clean, and they were well clothed. You could see on them that they were in a lot better conditions than some of these others that have arrived previously. Now, the Congolese group that arrived, the church from Sedalia came to pick them up. I was just really tickled by this. They came with winter coats because these people, arriving in Missouri in the middle of the winter,
Sure.
these people have never experienced winter like this. So this church comes.
They were from the Congo. From what I've seen about the Congo, I remember Ken Hovind did a whole thing on the Congo, that there's parts of the Congo like that we've never explored. Man's hardly ever explored. Not like, I guess you would say like European or American or people, because it is so unbearable, the heat in a lot of different parts of the Congo, especially the jungle, that it's literally, you can't even go in there. I mean, you would die from like the heat. It's that bad. I think the combination of the humidity and the heat, it is so incredibly untenable, you just can't even survive. So yeah, of all people on the planet, I would imagine they would probably have the least exposure to cold. I'm pretty sure it's right on the equator, and it's very, very, very incredibly hot.
And they've got coats, and they've got, everything that these people need to be in Missouri in mid-February. So I thought that was great. I love that.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that's the thing. There is a place for refugees.
Right.
There's a reason countries welcome in people who are being persecuted or responding to a natural disaster or what have you. But you're telling...
Yeah, and again, I have no problem. I think it's great. Bring in Christians wherever they're being persecuted. Whether it's Africa, whether it's the Middle East, get them out of harm's way. Of course, we could do so much on the ground over there to stop but no, we've actually funded the very terrorists that are killing the Christians. Okay, but we've done so. The blood of so many Christian martyrs are on the hands of the wicked, evil politicians in this country in particular, and in Europe as well, that have actually funded these terrorists, enabled them, created these organizations like ISIS, and things of this nature, they're the ones that are actually creating them.
Me that what was promised to us, that these were vetted refugees. Not only do we have people in law enforcement who are saying the vetting process is rigged and the countries that they're coming from are lying, but you're saying at the UN refugee meeting, they're telling you that they're not even vetted at all. They're grabbing them and giving them tickets and getting on the airplane.
Right. They kind of made casual remarks about the vetting process, saying things like, well, if they're vetted, maybe they're vetted. But I walked away from those meetings with a clear understanding that these refugees are not vetted. And not only were they not vetted, but when they arrived here, and we were being taught or trained on how to process them into the state. And so we were
But you can't go any place on earth as an American or from Europe and go to a country and expect them not to vet you, or expect to, if you're trying to gain citizenship, expect not to be typically paying some type of very, very high price to even get in the country and to become a citizen. I know I've checked into stuff before about becoming citizens and I mean, it's typically a huge monetary outlay, and you typically have to show them that you're going to be a contributing member of society. Things, the exact opposite criteria that applies to these devils. No vetting. They're full of diseases. They're going to come here and kill us. Okay, you win. You filled all of our. We checked off all the boxes. You filled every one of them. Thank you. Come in and serve Satan to your fullest extent you can. Kill, rape, steal, and kill. Maybe it's not going to be right when they get off the plane, but when that green light's given, sure, kill. That's basically what their mandate is.
told that when they arrive at the airport, we are to take them to a processing place, which is someplace in the airport. So we take them to this room, we sit them down, and hopefully there's a translator. Hopefully. Sometimes there's not a translator. And
Well, hold on one second, because that brings up a really interesting point. If they're arriving on an airplane, it's probably fanfare, and there's people waiting at the airport with signs, welcome refugees. They're probably bringing in school kids. Is that the sort of reception they're getting, or do they bring them in kind of unannounced?
Right. They're coming in at night. They're coming in at midnight. Right. And we were told that this is because the plane fare's cheaper, is what they're telling us. But
That makes no sense.
But they talked out of the side of their mouth and said, but there's less public. There's less public at the airport. And so I think that's closer to the truth. If they come in at night and they're diseased and they're dirty and they're coming with the clothes on their back and there's no interpreter and they haven't been vetted, doesn't it make sense that they would come at night? They would deliberately bring them in at night.
They're sneaking them in.
Sure.
Wow.
Sure.
So obviously, if
they don't want this to be something where what would be good is if actually people in the alternative media started showing up and literally exposing what is actually going on and filming this and confronting these people as they're getting off the plane, confronting the people that are actually there to pick them up and to whisk them off under cover of night. Now, it reminded me of a lot of some of the Bible verses. John 3:19, it says, and this is the condemnation, that light is come into the world, and that light is Jesus Christ, and men love darkness rather than light. And this it reminds me of, like a cockroach likes darkness. As somebody that's doing evil things likes dark. They're going to be bringing in, they know what they're doing is wrong and evil, so they're going to bring them in under the cover of night. And it says, men love darkness rather than light because their deeds were evil. And this is definitely a very evil thing that's going on. John 3:20 says, for everyone that doeth evil hateth the light, neither cometh to the light, lest his deeds should be reproved. Okay, so everything that they're trying to do, and they've got the mainstream prostitute media to cover for them every step of the way, everything that they're doing under the cover of darkness, all the pedophile scandals, this that we're talking about now, all of the wickedness that is being done in high government and in underground bases and by the Illuminati and by Hollywood and in every other place wicked things are going on, they want to make sure that those deeds are done in darkness and that darkness is kept on it so that their deeds are not reproved. And that's the main function of the mainstream media, is to protect these devils. So I just kind of wanted to throw that in there.
If we know they're full of communicable diseases, the airplanes are then sanitized
Oh yeah, well, listen to this.
and cleaned out before normal Joe American gets on for his morning commute, right?
I asked that same question. I asked in the meetings, is anybody cleaning the planes? What's going on with the planes and the vehicles that pick these refugees up? You're either using your personal vehicle or, in my case, I was going to rent a 15-passenger van to
Okay.
pick them up. And so then the question I had was, who's going to clean this? Because if you're talking tuberculosis, which is airborne,
Right.
HIV, which can be transmitted through a sneeze or a cough through droplets of moisture from an infected individual, or if you're talking about leprosy, which is very contagious, how are you going to clean these vehicles? And they never answered my question.
And this is coming not only from these Muslims that they're flying in, but also the illegal aliens that are coming in from Central America and Mexico and those types of places. They're bringing all kind of communicable diseases. And again, it's just one more element to how they're trying to destroy America. Bringing in these, I mean, for the most part, very, very pagan, demon-infested individuals that are, and I pray to God, I do pray to God their souls be saved, if it be possible, but for the most part, these people have a hatred of America. They're coming here to either destroy us or because they think that they're entitled to this, and that, they're going to come here to ultimately fulfill some type of agenda like Azatlan with the Mexicans, where they believe that, the gringo or whatever took their land away a long time ago, and we're here to take it back. And that's a whole other part that we talked about in the last study. So these planes and these transportation vehicles and these types of things are not being cleaned. You could have people coming all the way from the Middle East with multiple diseases that are communicable, spreading them all over the plane, and the plane's not being cleaned at all. And then you get on there with your family, and you wonder why you or certain members of your family start turning up with tuberculosis or, God forbid, leprosy or whatever else. But that's what our government wants for us. That's exactly what they are trying to do. It's just one aspect of it, though.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's absolutely nuts. So they get off the airplane. They're taken. Where do they go from that point?
Well, before they arrive, agencies, there's some agencies that are supposed to be administrating the influx of these refugees. So there's, in Kansas City, it's Jewish Vocational Services or Jewish Technical Services. They go by both names. And then in St. Louis, Catholic Charities. Then there's
Okay.
a Lutheran organization. And so these agencies, if you will, receive funding for these refugees. They receive right off the bat $2,500 just to go
Whoa.
pick them up. I mean, just to bring them in and process them.
So these devil 501c3 whorish, yoked up with the government, Christian religious organizations receive $2,500, and I'm not sure if that's for like the whole plane load of them or per person, just to go pick them up. So the love of money is the root of all evil. There's a lot of people that are getting mega, mega rich off this, and they're doing it under the cover of Christianity, typically, whether it's Catholicism or Lutheran or whatever. These different organizations are going and picking them up. Huge financial incentives. And what does that also do? That also gives them a huge financial incentive to keep their mouths shut. So this is why I have screamed so much about the 501c3 whore church for so long, because of all the nefarious evil things. And then you look at the clergy response teams, and you look at how, just gigantic amount of pastors in America are on the FEMA clergy response teams, yoked up with Homeland Security. They're literally keeping tabs on their congregation. And when the time comes, they're going to tell their congregation, come in, whether it's some type of plague event or whatever, come in, get your shots. We're going to come in and protect you. And they're going to be rounded up and put on buses and taken away to the labor camps, the concentration camps. And they're going to use these churches, these 501c3 whorehouses, essentially, as the staging areas to literally, and the pastors won their trust a long time ago, even though they have no idea the pastors even clergy response, because they're sworn to secrecy and they'll never reveal it to their congregation. Some misapplication of Romans 13 and wanting to save their own hide to boot. They're going to sell out their congregations. Now, I'm not saying every 501c, but there's going to be a ton of them. That is the norm, I would have to say at this point. They're wolves in sheep's clothing. They have no true love for the sheep because they're a hireling. They're doing it for the money. They're doing it to save their own skin. They'll sell out their whole congregation in order that they don't have to go to the camps, even though they're going to end up there as well. A lot of these churches have railroad tracks right next to I reported on that one. Railroad tracks that go right by the church, just load them right up on like cattle cars. When the time comes and the FEMA clergy response teams are activated, that's exactly what their primary responsibility. I have read you all of the documents that came straight from the minutes from these meetings where that's exactly what it said. Your job, pastor, is to not quote Bible. It's to placate the masses. It's to basically give them comfort up until the point where essentially they're taken off to the concentration camps and force vaccinated. So this is what we're dealing with here.
Okay.
And so after that, then, they're also awarded block grants. And the block grants are for setting up shops, so to speak, so that you can have a staff and an office and office equipment and leasing costs, all of this. So, and we know that they're making an incredible amount of money doing this. I have not been able to ascertain exactly how much money is being spent on the refugees themselves versus how much money is being awarded to these agencies.
Sure.
So in my estimation, these agencies are making quite a bit of money off of this program.
It's almost like they're making money running refugees.
Sure.
Wow.
Sure.
So in other words, it's blood money. They've sold their soul to Satan a long time ago. These 501c3 religious organizations under the guise of Christianity. And, this is the state of affairs we find ourselves in at least in America. I'm sure it's very, very similar over in Europe as well and in other places. I just think it's, as far as America goes, we're probably the most interconnected and organized as far as the whole 501c3 corporate church goes. Because, there's churches about on every corner here.
Okay, so we're talking about the idea that these organizations are making money running these refugees.
Mm-hmm.
What's happening to the refugees themselves, though? They come into town, are they given a place to live, maybe some spending money? What happens to them?
Okay. These agencies are notified about the number of refugees they'll be receiving.
Okay.
And that's through the U.S. State Department. And so they're told, Kansas City will receive this many, St. Louis will receive this many.
And again, this is all being coordinated with the United Nations. They're the ones telling the churches what you're going to be receiving. And the churches are looking at this, or the 501c3 organizations, religious organizations, are looking at some big payday every time they get a load of these Muslim terrorists in. I'm not saying every one of them are, but a ton of them are. And so it's incomprehensible.
And so on. And so it's broken down into days and times. And so they're given a calendar or an itinerary of when these refugees will be arriving. So the job of the agency then is to find housing for these refugees and to find a job for the refugees and to get them set up on food and Medicaid and welfare and a housing allowance. In addition to receiving cash, they receive cash upon arrival.
What?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And I will say this. Recently, when I mentioned this,
So food, housing, and cash, and every other little thing that they could possibly need, and they have nothing to contribute to society other than beheading you and raping, the women and the small children and the small boys. That's basically, in a nutshell, what we're getting in return. And it's your hard-earned taxpayer money at work doing all this.
In a meeting with some legislators,
Sure.
a legislative assistant said under her breath, "Well, that money is for gas." And so I walked over to her and I said, "I'm so sorry, I didn't hear what you said. Tell me again what you said." She goes, "That cash, it's for gas." And I said, "So you're going to give a refugee gas money and they don't even have a car? That doesn't make sense."
Or nowhere to go.
Or nowhere to go.
Because typically with refugees, you set up a refugee camp, and they all live in the camp until it's safe for them to go home, and then they go home. You don't set them up with jobs and, careers. But wouldn't they need like a work visa or some sort of identification number to get a job?
Well, they come into country with no paperwork. We were
Okay.
told that over and over. In fact, the paper trail started, I got the impression it was starting with us once they arrived here and we began to fill it out. Now, interestingly, because their names were hard to understand or there was not a way to get them to communicate to us what their names were, many of the applicants are just simply listed FUNU. And FUNU stands for full name unknown.
Wait.
Yeah.
Hold on. So not only are we not vetting them, even though the government tells us we are, not only are they coming in with communicable diseases and we're not doing anything to protect the public, they're literally coming in completely, your name is FUNU, full name unknown. And then how do we know they were vetted? Like, shouldn't they at least come with a piece of paper that says, yes, you were vetted by U.S. Customs Agent 472 in Syria or something?
You would think.
Okay, so Mr. Unknown comes off the airplane.
Right.
Then what?
Well, we were encouraged to get them processed with a medical review team, and the medical review team.
So again, they don't even know their names. I mean, how do you vet someone when they have no paperwork? None. They could be the worst butcher of Babylon terrorist that you could possibly imagine. Well, we don't need any of that. We don't need any vetting. We don't need to know who you are. What are you, prejudice? What are you, bigot or something? What are you, anti-Muslim? Are you Islamophobic? Of course we don't need any of that. They could do whatever they want. I mean, literally, this is the insanity of the world that we're living in here. Whereas an American or somebody from Europe or whatever could never go into another country and expect those kind of, I don't even know what you would call it, expect that kind of treatment, ever. But evidently, they're owed that from us because we're the wicked infidels and we owe them. We owe them big time, and I guess this debt has to be paid that way. They just have to come in and, without question.
Is supposed to go over their medical history and identify any kind of maladies they may have come into country with. Well, that was somewhat alarming to me, I'm going to be honest with you, because I know that if you or I wanted to, say, take a cruise, and let's say yesterday, the day before the cruise, you came down with a fever. When you show up to get on that ship, they're going to fill out a little card, and they're going to say to you, "Mr. Tolley, have you been sick within the last 24 hours?" And if you said to them, "Well, yeah, I had a fever yesterday," you're out. You don't get on the ship. And
Right.
I mean, that's to get on a cruise. And that's if you had a fever. I mean, it's nothing compared to having tuberculosis or leprosy. Or it's just total incomprehensible insanity.
Same with coming into the country. I've traveled outside of the country, and when we get ready to come back in, they'll do the same thing on the other side.
Yep.
Have you had any illnesses, or have you cut yourself, any wounds, anything wrong with you?
Hey, we even come in contact with livestock. Like, they ask us a ton of questions.
Yeah. And have you drank any of the milk from a country that doesn't test their cattle for tuberculosis?
Right.
Because you'll get tuberculosis. So, yeah, we're asked these things before we come in. So these refugees are not afforded that same line of questioning. They're, as best I can tell. Now, the medical review team that's processing them when they come in, they are asking them questions, about general health overall. But I would also like to let you know that, much to my shock, they wanted us to try to identify them in such a way that they would qualify for long-term Social Security disability. Now,
What?
yeah, and long-term Social Security disability is for life.
Yeah.
So if they get identified and qualify for long-term Social Security disability, they are as good as set up for life for medical treatment.
That doesn't sound like a refugee to me. Just being honest.
Yeah.
That sounds like.
I mean, this sounds just like the ultimate, our government complicit in scamming the system. I mean, I've heard of people trying to get, that type of disability, like, let's say, somebody trying to fake whatever. But this is where the government is literally complicit in making sure that this happens. I'm just shaking my head. I can't even believe what we're listening to.
Somebody who's planning on staying here.
Yeah,
A
right,
refugee
right.
stays until the problem's over and then goes home.
Well, that's right. And so they instructed us to try to identify, to try to get the client, because once they arrive here, they're now called clients. They're now
They're called clients.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
because clients pay.
Sure.
See, but they're not paying a dime. But they're getting paid. These 501c3 sold out to Satan organizations that are bringing them in, they're getting paid by our wicked government in order to make this all happen. Like she said, the $2,500. I don't know if that's per person or whatever, but there's probably a multiple of different ways they're being paid, so that they make sure that, obviously if they were just being paid to bring them in or whatever, and they had no incentive to keep, I don't know, making sure that every little whim of the Muslim was being supplied. If there was no monetary incentive, they probably wouldn't. They'd probably say, okay, well, we've made as much money as we can make because we're devils. We're these 501c3 devils, and okay, you're on your own. But that's not happening, as you're going to see. They're being taken care of on a monthly basis, and then if you could get them on long-term Social Security, well, then they're set for life. Absolutely set for life. Social Security, which they've not paid a dime into, nothing, and they're getting that. They're getting those benefits. I mean, this is the most satanic thing. Oh my word!
Sure. I'm starting
And
to
so-
see where this is leading. Here.
So they told us that we needed to talk to the client and ask them if they had any headaches, recurring headaches, or any lower back problems. Excuse me, anything that would qualify them for Social Security long-term disability.
Wait. So let me get this straight. Part of the screening is supposed to be, are you sick, maimed, injured, whatever?
Right.
No. Okay, good, you can come in.
Yeah.
You get on the airplane, are you sick, maimed, injured, whatever? Yes. Good, so we can give you disability.
Correct.
What?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's all based on lies. It's all based on, you tell me what you want to hear getting in, okay? The Muslims train, they're being groomed on what to say and what not to say. And then when they get here, they're also being groomed what to say and what not to say. Meaning, okay, if you say this, yeah, I've got lower back, or whatever. Okay, great. We're going to put you on Social Security disability for the rest of your life. You're set up forever, buddy. Here you go. And you don't have to do anything for it. You just, here it is. Yeah. That's, I mean, this should be front page news all across America. And I mean, whoever is responsible for this, I mean, like Trump said, literally disconnecting from the United Nations would be one of the main steps I would literally love to see. I mean, obviously, because they are the backbone of the coming New World Order. They are literally the coming backbone. Not only from a political sense, but also from a religious sense, because they're the main ones that are behind those types of devil gurus like the guy that refers to himself as Lord Maitreya. And when his website first came out, who says he's basically the savior of like all the major monotheistic religions, he's their awaited savior. When that website was first came out with Share International, it was United Nations sponsored. Okay. Later, the United Nations kind of distanced itself, and that part was taken off the website because they didn't want to appear as though they were that joined at the hip. Okay, but there's a huge, suffice it to say, there's a huge religious component with the United Nations. Okay, in fact, that's probably the most important component, but it's the one that you don't hear a lot about. If you're doing anything with the UN, you're not going to hear a lot about the religious components. That's more the people that are in the know at the higher levels. But that will be unveiled at a future date, obviously.
This is insanity.
Yes, it is insanity.
But in order to get Social Security disability benefits, don't you need a Social Security number?
Well, we were instructed in the meeting that one of the first things we were supposed to do was sign them up for Social Security. Yeah.
Wait, this is unbelievable. So they come over here and they get a Social Security number.
Right.
They've not paid a dime into Social Security. They're going to be nothing but a burden on our society. They're going to contribute nothing. The only thing they're going to contribute is raping, stealing, killing, pillaging, and ultimately committing jihad against the infidel Americans. Okay, ultimately. I'm not saying that's all going to happen the first day. I'm saying ultimately that's why we're bringing them in. As a fifth column, troops that will go and they will die, and they'll have no problem with it because they think they're going to be in, if they can die while killing infidels, and that's all you're going to have around you, so there's a very, very good chance that you're going to go to paradise in that particular environment to be with your 72 virgins and white-skinned boys. That's all part of the deal that Muslim religion made up, saying whenever you kill an infidel in service, that's where you're going to go. That's part of the deal. Because that satisfies the Muslim and his pedophilic natures, especially with little boys, because they really like little boys. Just go to Afghanistan or Pakistan where they have their little chai tea boys that they have as their little sex slaves, and they treat them like dogs and they treat them lower than animals. And then that generation grows up and it does the same thing. And it's this big, demonic, disgusting society where that is viewed as the absolute normal. I mean, that is, don't even say anything against it because that is normal, that's wonderful, it's good, and, you know. But yet we're the infidel dogs. What I love about it. They're the most unclean devils, evil, sickening what they do, and yet we're viewed by them as the infidel, unclean dogs. I love it. I just love the dichotomy there.
Become legal.
Correct.
Are you pulling my leg?
No, I'm not. And then after we processed them for a Social Security card, then we were to process them for a U.S. passport.
No, you're not.
Yes, yes.
So that's about the time I kind of.
So I mean, hey, they got Social Security, they got a passport. You're going to see what other goodies they get here.
Okay, I was done. I've heard everything I want to know. I was so angry about this, that they would receive a U.S. passport. It just, you know, I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that we were giving these people Social Security cards and U.S. passports and free medical, free housing, free food, free everything.
Free everything.
Yeah, but the thing that bothers me, because the food we can recoup from, and the money irritates me, but we can earn it back and we can stop the program or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. But once you give somebody a Social Security number, mm-hmm. and you give them what's considered globally the golden ticket, which is a U.S. passport.
Right.
That is beyond comprehension that we're doing this.
That's right.
Do bureaucrats know this is happening?
Well, interestingly enough, no, they don't. A lot of governors are unaware of how many refugees have come into their state, where they're located, under what conditions they've arrived. And I believe this is intentional.
And again, they could, use plausible deniability. Oh, well, I didn't know this was happening when they knew all along it was happening. And they were in on it. And, so I'm not really inclined to give people like governors or senators or congressmen these big breaks where, oh, well, they didn't know. Well, golly gee whiz, I mean, they just didn't know, and oh boy, look what happened. This is their job. This is their job. They should know everything about this, and I don't buy it. I just don't buy it personally.
Now, we do know that the governor of Texas and the governor of Tennessee have both stopped this, and they're refusing to take any more refugees. In fact, the federal government has filed a lawsuit against both of those states because they're refusing to take any more refugees.
How dare you keep your people safe?
Right.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stop. I'm over time here. I'm going to stop part 1 here, and we will go to part 2 next. God bless you. We'd like to welcome you back to part 2 of our current event and Bible study for March 20th, 2017. We're going to go ahead and continue with this interview entitled Diseased Refugees Obtaining Social Security Numbers and Passport Upon Arrival. And she just covers so many things in this interview that I wasn't even aware of, and other agendas of the UN. And this is why I'm playing so much of the interview, because there's just so many important topics that are covered here. So let's go ahead and continue.
But okay, so let's just say all the states are saying we want to pull out of this refugee resettlement program from the federal government. Then they're fine, right? There's no other way the refugees are getting in.
Well, no. The state can assert that they no longer want to receive refugees, and then the federal government.
Okay, so the state can assert we don't want to receive refugees. Texas and the other state that they had said are doing that. But then now there's a way around that too. There's a loophole there that she's going to get into right now.
Government says, all right. And so then they start implementing a program called the Wilson Fish program. And Wilson Fish simply bypasses the sovereignty of that state. In other words, the state no longer processes the refugees. That means, in plain English, you no longer get to know how many are coming in, when they're coming in, where they're going, how much money is being spent on them, whether they're diseased or not diseased. You've lost all control over the entire situation, and as a sovereign state, you've relinquished that. And so Wilson Fish comes in then, and all of the federal monies that are set aside for this program bypass the state and go to third-party entities. And that would be something like Catholic Charities or Jewish Vocational Services. So it would bypass the state entirely, and they would take over the entire process of processing the refugees.
That's crazy.
It is crazy. And as a U.S. citizen and as a citizen of the sovereign state of Missouri, I am not in favor of that. I think we need to maintain our sovereignty, just like we would in the United States. You know, honestly, we are first a citizen of the state of Missouri because we are a sovereign state, and then we're a citizen of the United States of America. But our first sovereignty and citizenship is to our state, and a lot of people don't realize that. So in order for us to maintain the health and welfare and the security of our borders, we must know who's coming and going.
Yeah, you have to.
Right.
You have to. And FUNU doesn't work for me.
FUNU doesn't work for me either.
And giving them a social security number and a passport.
Meaning the name FUNU, which they're all just using out of, I have no idea. They're just giving that as their name. I mean, no name, no paperwork, no vetting, no nothing. I mean, you could be dealing with, you know, just a trainload of Charles Manson's Muslim versions, and let them all in, you know. Come one, come all.
Or it actually makes this problem worse, not better.
Correct.
Have we been placed at risk? I mean, you mentioned that this is an invasion. Are we at risk?
I believe we are at risk, Josh, because when they come in, we're urged to compatriate them with fellow refugees, those who have come in before them. We're urged to locate other communities of refugees from the same country of origin, the same language, the same culture as those who are arriving.
So the terrorist culture, wherever terrorist culture in whatever country that they come from, and that way they can, obviously they'll speak the same language. They'll probably be more on a less competitive, more of a even keel level footing. Maybe they won't view them so much like maybe somebody from another country that maybe they would have a rivalry with. So they want to get them all, in other words, they want to get all of these Muslims on the same page with their same countrymen as quickly as possible, in order for that these same Muslims, that they'll show them the ropes and show them how to work the system and be just evil and wicked, which is what they do best.
And so when they come in, you know, and we have had Syrians come in, and we know Syrians are on the list of those 7 countries that have been banned. And so we've received Syrians here in Missouri.
Even after the ban?
Yes.
What?
Yes.
Well, but the ban never, I mean, the ban was only in effect for a very, very short period of time, and then the 9th District Court, the one that's like the most notorious for being corrupt and evil, they blocked it, and then Obama or Trump tried to get it up again, and then again got blocked again because Obama met with a his Harvard appointed judge he graduated with 48 hours before he struck it down. So again, this is something that is very, very, very near and dear to Satan's heart, that this happened, that these Muslims get in here unvetted, diseased up as much as possible, and therefore they can do the most damage, especially when their green light is given.
And so these Syrians are coming in, and we know that they are coming from a country of origin that has malevolent intent toward us as a nation. And we now know they're not being vetted, and we now know that not only are they coming from a malevolent country, or a country that has malevolent intent, and we now know they're not vetted, we're giving them support, and we're giving them a passport.
What name do they put on the passport if their name on the thing is Funu?
I don't know.
Can they just pick a name?
Well, the state of Missouri was actually dinged, if you will. That's probably a poor use of that word. We were penalized because we had too many applications with FUNU on them. So, in other words, we had a very large number of refugees floating around out here whose identity we had not ascertained, and how they're filling out a passport application escapes me. I don't know. If we don't know their name, how are they getting Social Security benefits?
Right.
How are they getting
This is so insane.
passport? I don't know.
I mean, why can't they pick a real good substantial name like Belvedere Jehoshaphat, or maybe Aloysius Spoonchuckle, Boutros Huffnagel? I don't know, some wacky name. They can't even pull that off. They've got to use the same weird Farsi name that they're concocting, and they're getting. I mean, it's so unbelievable that we're actually even having to report on this.
Do any of these people plan on leaving? Did you hear any talk about, they're here for a little while and they're going back home?
No, in fact, we were encouraged strongly to try to not only find employment for them, which I questioned a couple of times in the meetings, the employment piece, because if they can't speak English and they're sick and they don't have transportation, how do we reasonably expect them to be employed?
Right.
And so let's say they do speak some English. Let's say they speak maybe broken English. And let's say they're not sick. They're, moderately healthy. So we get them a job. I learned in the meetings that oftentimes they won't hold a job because on the other side of the process, they're told that they're coming to the U.S. for free food, free housing, free medical, free clothing, free everything. And so when they get here and somebody mentions the word job, well, they're not real excited about that.
No.
So these deadbeat devils, bent on our destruction, bent on our eradication, they don't want a job. Are you kidding me? You infidels are going to support us, and you're going to like it. You're going to support us lock, stock, and barrel. We're getting everything for free. Medical, housing, money, and we're not going to have no job. We're not going to be some contributing member of society. We're here to kill you. What are you thinking?
Plus, if you earn too much, you can't have your disability.
Well, I don't know if that applies in this situation, honestly.
This is crazy.
It is crazy.
No, I'm sure if they had a job, all their benefits would still all be there. It would just be, counterproductive to their mindset and their way of thinking. How are they going to really get a job? They don't even speak the language. They probably, the average skill set is probably not going to be super compatible with what America would need as far as skill sets go. I'm just being honest here. I don't know.
Okay, so let's say they come in under the cover of midnight into Kansas City, St. Louis, wherever around the country they're coming.
Right.
Do we at least keep track of these people?
Well, we're supposed to.
Okay.
They're supposed to be monitored. But oftentimes when they get here and they're dropped off by the volunteers, whoever's picking them up from the airport and taking them to their place of residence.
Volunteers. When those same organizations are getting $2,500 a pop to bring them in, and it's probably per person, in some way, shape, or form. $2,500. What if only 3 came in? You're going to pay them $2,500 as opposed to what if 50 came in? So to me, I would think it would be per person in some way, shape, or form. There's got to be some huge financial incentive.
agency, once they're there, some have left that and moved on, or they've just vanished. We don't know where they
That's
are.
nice.
We have no idea. We don't know if they've even crossed state lines or not. We did hear that some of them crossed over.
Well, I mean, when you come in with no paperwork, no real name, no vetting, no nothing, how easy would it be, as long as you get introduced to your countrymen, to whatever terrorist cell you're going to be amalgamated and assimilated into, how easy would it be for them to disappear? Totally off the radar, totally off the books, and our government loves it. They love it, sure.
To Illinois, and they're supposed they're supposed to check in with the agency that processed them, but
Oh, you and I both know that's not happening.
sure, no.
And the reality is there's nothing that keeps them from crossing over either.
Right.
It's not like we have fences between Missouri and Illinois. You make it across, you're in Illinois.
Right, and keep in mind, someone asked me this recently. Well, how are they, if they're not staying in the home or the residence where they were placed? How are they receiving their funds? How are they receiving their benefits? Well, they get just like anybody here in America that's on, say, food stamps. You get an electronic banking card, and that's how you get your food at the grocery store. And so your cash again is on a card, and so and your Medicaid card. So once they've obtained these items, they can live pretty much anywhere they want to live. And there's
It's just the perfect system for breeding terrorists, for nurturing them, for taking care of them, for making sure they've got great medical, great housing, they're well fed, and they can go wherever they want, and there's no rules that apply to them, really. I mean, if they went out and they started beheading people, obviously the local law enforcement would whatever, but I mean, that green light hasn't been given yet. Now, granted, yeah, you'll see some terrorist attacks. Obviously, we've seen an escalation of that. But in mass, it hasn't happened yet. And that's what I'm talking about, that trigger event where they are these terrorist cells, which have literally been here for decades, are given the green light to commit jihad, holy war against the infidels.
a way really to track down where they're coming from.
And I would assume that once it's under the Wilson Fish program, that's even harder to keep track of.
Well, I would imagine it would be, because Wilson Fish, like right now, under Missouri state law, if you and I wanted to Freedom of Information request documents on these people, and I have, then by law, they have to send us those documents. Sometimes they'll assign a dollar amount for copy fees or, looking for them or what have you. But you can obtain those documents. If this program, the Wilson Fish program, were to come in and override the sovereignty of our state and this fall into third-party hands, we've lost all ability to know any information.
So how prevalent is the Wilson Fish thing? Because a lot of people are thinking, well, if I can just get my governor and my legislature to say, we don't want the refugees, we'll be like Tennessee and Texas, and yeah, the feds will sue us, but stand behind my governor.
Mm-hmm.
But the Wilson Fish thing circumvents that whole process.
Sue us for not taking in these terrorists, these unvetted terrorists. Yeah. That's the upside down world that we're talking about here.
Right.
How prevalent is Wilson Fish?
We only have a few states right now.
And yes, this is the same Wilson Fish of the Wilson Fish Sticks fame. If you were wondering, I know there's a lot of you out there that were saying, is that the same Wilson Fish Sticks guy? Yeah, just like the Gordon's Fisherman, this is the Wilson Fish Sticks guy. Okay. Anyway, I just want to, sorry, little humor there, little fish humor.
That have implemented Wilson Fish.
Okay.
Yeah, I think by and large most of the states are similar to ours in that they want to maintain and retain sovereignty over the process. So, but honestly, there are people out there who are fighting for us to become a Wilson Fish state.
That's insane.
But as long as they're not fighting for us to become a Wilson Fish stick. It's a big difference between a Wilson Fish state and a Wilson Fish stick. So I just wanted to clarify, again, little lighthearted humor.
It's insane. So the people come off the airplane
Taylor's shaking her
looking
head.
for a new place to get free stuff, new name, new identity, and I'm sure they're all peaceful and friendly, unlike the ones that we're seeing in Europe. Have there been any cases where
Right.
even the people who are driving them to their destination have felt a little uneasy about what's happening?
Sure. One of the directors in one of the meetings that I attended said he wasn't going to go pick them up from the airport anymore. He'd made several pickups, and he told a story in one of the meetings that he had picked up a van full of Syrians, and all males. And
Yeah,
he had a
of course.
couple-hour drive.
Innocent as the day is long. I mean, pure as the driven snow. Innocent as little kittens, little Himalayan kittens, like a litter of Himalayan kittens. I mean, these are salt of the earth. These are the best of the best. These are just good people, you know. So let's hear about them.
Ahead of him to get them to the city where they were going to be relocating. Well, they started yelling at him on the van in the van. They started threatening him, and he felt like his life was in danger. So he pulled the van over.
Wow.
He was not going to finish transporting them, but he couldn't get anybody to wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning to
Sure.
come and get them. You know, because it's 2 o'clock in the morning in the middle of winter. You know, so he ended up finishing the drive and getting them placed, but. You know, it's.
Can you imagine being in a van in the middle of the night, having these Muslim terrorists behind you screaming and yelling at you? I mean, you're just waiting for the machete to come out and have your head lopped off from behind. I mean, you know what I mean? I mean, I can't even imagine. And, like, why isn't there like a mass outcry of like whistleblowers that are, I guess they're, I don't know, they've drank the Kool-Aid or something, or maybe they're being paid off. I have no idea. Maybe they just feel like they're, oh, if I say anything about this, it won't be politically correct because it'll be Islamophobic. I don't know. But, I mean, this is absolutely insane. Because you know if it happened to this guy, this is happening all the time. These people have an inherent hatred of Americans. America to them is known as the great Satan. Israel is known as the little Satan. That's how we are viewed, as the most hated infidels on the planet. So a lot of times, they're not going to be able to hold back. They're not going to be able to contain their hatred. And this is just an example of that. The guy is very fortunate he got out of there with his life.
Scared him enough to swear off ever doing it again. He wasn't going to pick up anymore.
I don't know why.
Now, the progressive media doesn't understand that Islam and Muslim is not a race. They think if you're anti-Islam, you're a racist or something. But just from an Islamic perspective, are we seeing that mosques in some of these bigger cities, St. Louis, Kansas City, are they working with these organizations to bring these people in or house them or feed them or at least pick up part of the bill?
Not to my knowledge. I haven't seen any involvement from any of these Islamic organizations, such as...
No, because that's the infidels' responsibility. We're the ones that need to pay to bring these savages in, these diseased savages in, the ones that have just been killing the Christians over in the Middle East and maybe not have enough bloodlust satisfied, and are told, hey, you're going to get a free meal ticket over here and be able to rape all the women you want and procreate and kill all the infidels you want when the time is right. And then that's the carrot that's dangled out in front of them to come over here. You know, so this is their, I think, their motivating factor. And then also possibly, you know, dying for Allah and the service killing infidels and that whole rigmarole.
There.
Sure.
I haven't seen any involvement from any of them at all.
Wow.
But no, these Muslim organizations that are here, they're not going to lift a finger to do it. They're not going to put a dime into this. That's the infidels' deal. He's the one that brings them in. He's the one that brings the very people that are going to one day kill him and destroy him. I mean, it's almost like this really sick, cruel, satanic joke where they're just probably, you know, laughing their heads off in the background saying, look at these stupid tax-paying Americans. They're literally funding their own destruction. They're literally bringing in the very people that will be their executors. You know? I mean, now, again, I'm not saying God's not big enough to intervene. I'm not saying this has taken God by surprise. But I think a lot of this has to do with the lukewarm 501c3 churches and the fact that they're totally asleep. And that they're totally yoked up with the United Nations and the government and FEMA and Homeland Security and the clergy response teams. This is all just further evidence of that the 501c3 church is the biggest enemy of the Christian in America. And whatever its equivalent is in other parts of the world.
When you look at Europe, When you see how Sweden tried to deny that they were having violent problems, and then every day since the denial,
Right.
it's getting worse.
Right.
Grenades, rapes, it's insane.
Right.
When you look at what's happening to Europe, and you hear people here in America say, well, that's not going to happen here. We're different. What do you think when you hear that?
I think people are believing mainstream media, and I would caution viewers that are watching this right now to be very careful. Mainstream media.
They haven't got to the numbers that they've got in Europe. A lot of it is from a geographical standpoint. They were actually able to march them from Syria and get them into those countries via just on foot. Whereas if you bring them here, you got to either bring them by boat or by plane. Which, from a logistical standpoint, in order to get the kind of numbers that are necessary, in order to launch a proper jihad, Muslim-Islamic holy war, it's just logistically a lot harder. You've got oceans separating, whereas in Europe you don't have that. So it's a long way, but if you can march them on foot long enough, like they did, they marched them into Germany and they marched them into, Europe, it's easier for them to get there, and that's why they're at a much greater number. And I've broken down the statistics before where you'll see certain behavior out of Muslims when the population reaches 2%. And then when it reaches 4%, you'll see more aggressive behavior. When it reaches, it's all very well timed regarding, they keep track of their numbers, and they know what they can get away with when the population is at high enough, they can get away with a lot more. They have not reached those numbers necessary yet, but we've also got other things going on here that I don't think other countries have, where we've got all the illegal aliens coming in from Mexico and Central America. That's a whole other gigantic problem. We've got Russian troops literally on our soil. We've got Chinese troops literally on our soil. We've got Black Lives Matter. We have got the snowflake millennial movement. We've got a lot of other things going on in America that some other countries don't have. So that adds to the overall fifth column invasion, destructive force that will come against, I don't know what you want to call it, the Christian / patriot / pro Second Amendment movement. And so that's what the New World Order right now is trying to ascertain. Okay, do we have enough numbers? Do we have enough boots on ground? Do we have enough technology? Do we have enough wickedness here? You've got the Satanists. You've got the satanic super soldiers that will be activated. I haven't even talked about that. Then from a witchcraft standpoint, mass witchcraft. So they're trying to size up the situation, especially with Trump in office, because they're in full desperation mode because of the whole pedophile rings that keep going down and the whole threatening by Jeff Sessions. And this is why they went after him so bad. They're incredibly motivated, probably more motivated to kick this thing off than they have ever been since the inception of America. Okay, they're more motivated now than ever because they feel like they could be running out of time, and they feel like they may be losing the media war, the brainwashing. A lot of people are coming out of the trance and things of this nature. So this is what I believe from a satanic standpoint they're sizing up.
Media is lying to us. They're not telling us the truth. I've got a couple of cases that I can cite as examples.
Sure.
I was in Chattanooga, Tennessee last summer, and I was down there for some meetings. And the day after I left, the shooting took place in Chattanooga. And you may recall that the shooter was Islamic. He was a Muslim, and he shot the recruiting offices there in a strip mall. Happened to be right next door to the restaurant that I had had dinner at the night before.
Whoa.
So I think that's an example of the malevolent intent of these Muslims. Another example I would give you is a friend of mine they live in Texas. Their 20-year-old son was coming home from college. He was stopped at a traffic light just a few short blocks from home, coming home for the weekend, very close to home, and a car of refugees pulls up next to him at the stoplight and shoots him and kills him.
Whoa.
So, in my opinion,
And again, these are things. If there's any Muslim, if there's any illegal alien aspect to these stories, they're going to be swept under the rug as quickly as possible, if it's possible, and hope, and in their estimation, maybe only make like the local news or maybe regional news for that area, and then that's it. They're on to the next thing. Other headlines are going to trump this, and we're not even going to report on this because it doesn't fit the narrative.
this is a very serious and dangerous situation.
Sure.
Because they've not been vetted and we don't understand we don't know what they're planning or what their intent is. But we know enough to know. We've got enough examples here in the United States to know that this is really a serious problem. You know, the young lady that was shot walking with her father on the wharf in San Francisco just a couple of years ago. I mean, we've got quite a few examples of refugees who came in and illegally and through this process. I hesitate to call this process legal because to me it's circumventing so many laws.
There's nothing legal about any of this. I mean, you could not, again, as an American or as if you're from Europe or even wherever, you're not going to be able to go to like any other country and do what is being done here and in Europe. You just won't be able to do it. But we're supposed to overlook that and act like, you know, if we don't overlook it, we have no compassion.
You were saying that the governors, the legislators, they don't know what's going on. They're being kept from this.
Mm-hmm.
These refugees are coming in at midnight.
Mm-hmm.
Who does know? Does President Trump know this is happening and he's allowing this? Or are they keeping it from him too?
No, President Trump is very aware.
Okay.
And I'm very grateful for that.
And this is why when he got in office, one of the first things he did is he imposed the travel ban of the 6 Muslim countries that Obama had at one time even enacted. And, but when Obama did it, nobody said anything. I mean, none of the liberals. But when Trump did it, everybody went nuts. In the liberal media, and in the liberal left, and in Hollywood, and all the social justice warriors came out of the woodwork saying that, Trump's this bigoted racist that's trying to keep, America was built on, immigrants and all this other stuff. And again, these people are not being vetted. They're coming from the worst terrorist countries. They're full of diseases a lot of the times. They hate us. They want to kill us. But that's okay. That's all good. It's no big deal.
knows exactly. If you'll recall, during the campaign season, he actually mentioned this during his campaign, which gave me confidence in him that he must know something, and I believe he does know, simply by virtue of the fact that he has slowed down the influx coming in. He really kind of slammed on the brakes in February. On January 27th, he put the 120-day travel ban in place. That all those things tell me that he's aware of the danger. And so I believe, and he also came out publicly recently and said that he's going to implement extreme vetting. Now,
so he's got that. Like I had just reported on, the border crossings of illegal aliens are down 40%. Because, this word gets back to Mexico and Central America. Trump's going to, there's a lot of ICE arrests right now. People are being deported at, I'm sure, a record rate compared to anything Obama ever did. Obama was encouraging it all. And you're going to think twice now before trying to come here illegally, because you might be right back on a bus or a plane out of here, But the New World Order is trying to counter everything he's doing through like what she's talking about, and through every step of the way trying to block everything that Trump is doing and demonizing him for doing it, as we're seeing every day in the headlines. So let's go further here.
What do you think the end game is? Why do you think this is happening?
well, I would tie it back to the UN protocol for Agenda 2030.
Okay.
And Bill Clinton, when he was president in 1990.
Now, I gave you the end game as far as what the Islamic end game is. The Islamic end game is world domination, worldwide Islamic caliphate, worldwide Sharia law, worldwide subjection and eradication of the infidels. Ultimately, where the infidels wouldn't even be permitted to live. You either convert or die. And we will use, as they have said, we will use your wives' wombs as our greatest weapon in order to breed a whole new generation of Muslim warriors. Meaning they're going to take your wife, they're going to kill you, they're going to take your wife and your daughters, they're going to rape them, they're going to basically either sell them into sex slavery or bring them into their harem. And they're going to be the incubators, the baby incubators, essentially. That's how they're looking at it, for their jihad army. That's what they've said. That's what they've proven that they will do when they get enough numbers. In third world countries, you just look at what's going on in these Muslim-dominated countries, especially where any kind of Christians are present. Look at what they've done to the Yazidis. I mean, I've reported on this over and over. So she's going to talk more about, from a UN perspective, what is the goal.
He committed the United States to what was then called Agenda 21. Agenda 21.
Yeah.
It's changed names. I'm trying to keep up with all the variations of this name. So he committed the United States to Agenda 21 under his presidency, and then today they've changed the name to Agenda 2030 because they believe and desire to have full implementation of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals in place by 2030. Well, that's just what...
So in other words, I think before they thought they were going to have all these goals in place by 2021. Now they've realized we got to push the timetable back, thank God, to 2030. Okay, so that's, I think, why they changed the name, at least in part.
13 years from now. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so part of that agenda...
See, in other words, they're going to get in... We're only seeing the initial stages of how aggressive, if they're allowed to operate unchecked, if they're allowed to operate in wherever country they are without any opposition, we're just seeing the beginning of how aggressive they're willing to get. And bringing the Muslims in is the way to destabilize the country, is the way to culturally dilute, is a way to bring in a lot of evil people with their paganism. The illegal aliens coming up from Mexico and Central America, a lot of them are bringing in the Santa Muerte death cult religion and a lot of other paganism. And they know that if they can spiritually absolutely annihilate and corrupt a nation, and I'm not saying America's great anyway, but this is a whole other level of evil. This is more overt. This is more like getting into like just out and out satanic religions. That is going to have a huge, obvious impact on the people of the nation. It's going to defile the land. It's going to allow more devils and demons and evil entities to literally have a right to be here. And this is another reason they're trying to bring them in. These people, they're looking at them like vessels and containers for very, very high-level devils. Okay? And this will accelerate this United Nations 2030 agenda. The more they can bring into wherever they're trying to destabilize. That's why the United Nations is trying to do this.
Agenda is dropping national borders. Sure. No more borders. Yeah. It is really a one world government system.
And what their goal, obviously, I've said this before, the North American Union, which would be one of the 10 super states under Antichrist and false prophet that the Bible talks about in Daniel and in Revelation, that type of stuff. So you drop the border of Mexico, you drop the border of Canada, because you destabilize it so much where you just say, well, we don't know what to do. I mean, we're going to have to just form this one world government. I mean, everything's so unstable and the world economy is falling apart. So we're going to go to this as the satanic solution, where then you'll have most likely a North American Union currency. You'll have a North American Union political system. It'll all be merged. And then you'll have these 10 super states, super country kind of things that the Antichrist and false prophet. That's where they're moving us toward, the United Nations, just like the Bible says.
It's the end game.
Do you think Trump's going to be successful in the time that he has, given the fact that the Republicans don't seem to be moving at all? And it's almost like they want to stalemate this thing, just give him 3.5 years, get him out, and move on with the agenda?
I would say that, first of all, we need to pray. I'm a person of deep prayer, a person of faith. I believe in that, and I think
That's the only hope. Jesus Christ is the only hope for any of this. Yes, I agree. It's very important to be proactive. It's very important to put boots on the ground. It's very important to inform. But that in and of itself, apart from Christ, will not do anything, or very little, I believe, to ultimately change this. The forces at work are so evil, so satanic, and have so much monetary power. They're the ones that literally, control. They have, 99% of the world's wealth, this type of thing. And Satan's given that to them. The only hope for any of this is the intervention of Jesus Christ, is the intervention of Father God and Jesus Christ, that we might have more time. The problem I see is in the Bible, when I look at it, when I look at Daniel, when I look at Revelation, when I look at 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, I don't see a lot of Bible for this getting turned around. And people that want to say, we're going to beat this, we're going to defeat this, we're going to do this. Okay, well, you got to show me the Bible for that, because I'm really not seeing it. I don't need to be Johnny Raincloud over here, but I'm really not seeing how we're going to really, long-term, biblically, from a biblical perspective, turn this around. And I don't mean to, and I don't say that because I want everybody to just give up and to stop fighting wickedness or to stop fighting evil. I think we as Christians are supposed to do that. And light exposes darkness, and to reprove the unfruitful works of darkness and to have no fellowship with them, which is what the Bible says to do. And to reprove means you shed light on it, you expose it. That's a part of reproving. You rebuke it, but you're also exposing it and it says make manifest. You're manifesting them. In other words, these deeds that are done in darkness, you bring them out into the light so other people can see how wicked they are, and hopefully it will get them motivated as well.
it's very important that we do pray. We need to pray for him because there are people out there that even as we're sitting here are trying to get him out of office by one way or another. And so we need
They're trying to kill him. They're trying to get him out of office. They're trying to discredit him. They're trying to demonize him every day. And anybody on his cabinet that has any kind of righteous bone in their body, the mainstream media is hell-bent every day on besmirching them and smearing their character and demonizing them. And I mean, it's what they do. It's what they are doing. There is no debate on whether that's happening. All you have to do is just watch CNN for a day, and I wouldn't advise it.
support him. If you tweet, I would encourage you to get on Twitter. He tweets all day long, and I love it.
He's trying to do anything he can do to bypass the mainstream prostitute media, and tweeting is one of the only things he can really do because the mainstream media is totally against him. So he figures if I put a tweet out there, at least it's me, it's coming from me. And there's only so much they can do against that, other than they'll typically demonize whatever he says.
I just love that he does that because he's bypassing fake news.
Right.
And so we're hearing firsthand, straight from him, what's going on, and I love that. And I love the ability that we have now to tweet back or to respond to his tweets, which he pays attention to. So I think there's some things there that make him unique in his presidency that no other president has really taken advantage of. President Obama did some Facebooking and he did some tweeting, but not to the degree that President Trump has made this his main way of communicating with the American people. So I think we need to get behind him and support him. I think we need to pray for him. I also think that when we find things out, we need to do just like what I'm doing today. We need to sound the alarm. We need to let people know. The American people have long enjoyed what we call American exceptionalism.
Yeah.
And the world and some of the liberal ideologists want to shame us about that. They want to say to us, well, that's just white privilege. First of all, it has nothing to do with the color of your skin. It has nothing to do with the fact with being privileged. It has to do with the fact that we are U.S. citizens born in a sovereign nation that enjoys freedom.
Yeah, I mean, whether you're black, whether you're white, whether you're an Indian, whether you're Oriental, if you're an American, this should all concern you is equally no matter what your skin color is. But they're trying to divide and conquer, creating, particularly with the black against the white, and then the Hispanic with the whole, illegal alien thing, and then the whole Cal exit thing and the whole Azatlan thing. They're trying to create race wars between the Hispanic populations and the whites, and the black populations and the whites. But the main focus of demonization is the white race, as I've said before. I mean, you just look at all the propaganda Hollywood's putting out. I'm not saying that because I'm white. I'm saying it because if I was blue, I would still be reporting on this. This is what I'm seeing, guys. This is obviously what is going on. Does that mean there haven't been atrocities done to other races, like blacks or Indians? Sure, absolutely, there's been atrocities across the ages. I'm just saying what's going on right now is what I'm observing. It's a very, very big divide and conquer culture that we're in, and they do not want us united under one banner trying to pursue righteousness and trying to expose evil. They want to divide us all and get us fighting at each other and not looking at the real issues of who the real puppet masters are, you know, in the Illuminati, like the George Soroses and those types of people who are really the ones that are causing all of this division, and they're pouring billions and billions of dollars into creating this race war.
And it's freedom and liberty that we're really fighting for. And so when you realize that you're about to lose the standard of living in which you're accustomed, and you're about to lose your ability to live freely with liberty, then it burns, I mean, it starts a fire under you. You get a fire lit under you. And I've seen up close and personal how dangerously close we've come to losing those very freedoms and liberties. And so I think those things, you know, are some practical things.
Had Hitler got in, which they were not expecting, I think we would already be in a totally different world. I do believe that she said one of the first things, she intimated that she was going to go after the alternative media. It's a lot harder to shut down the alternative media, which is the only part of the media that's for Trump. It's very, very hard to do that when Trump's in office. Now, if they could get him out of office and install one of their puppets in there, like Pence or whatever, because I don't trust him any farther than I can throw him. I'm not saying that he would go after alternative media like Hillary would have, but it would probably be a matter of time. But had Hillary got in, I really would shudder to think what it would be like already. I mean, you know, we're you know, more than halfway through March, and going into spring especially, which I know they've got all kind of plans for when spring kicks off, and you know, like between now and May Day especially, all of these Soros-funded things to create this gigantic race war, and you know, that they've got planned. I think that would be, I don't know, I just shudder to think what it would already be like and what would be coming. Anyway, I just want to throw that in there.
Things that we can do, and certainly let our local officials know, our local elected officials know how we feel. One of the things that I've taken note about with President Trump is how often he's meeting with the governors of each state, you know, and even with some of the senators and congressmen or state representatives from each state. You know, he's really wanting and seeking answers. He wants to know the truth. I believe he's on a fact-finding mission, and I believe he's ultimately going to get the truth.
And it's almost like I think Trump isn't fully maybe aware. Maybe he is now, but I don't think when he first got into office, I don't think he was fully aware of how against him the Congress, the Senate, and the governors, and people in high political office, the judges that are against him, I don't think he had any concept of how entrenched the New World Order and the Obama regime and the Clinton machine is in high government, and how evil both the Republican and the Democrat sides, and how entrenched they are, and how bent they are on bringing in the New World Order. I don't think he had any concept, because he's assuming the best from people a lot of times, I think, which is kind of naive. You can tell he's trying to do this, he's trying to do that, he's thinking that they're going to listen to some kind of voice of reason, and they'll shake their head and they'll glad hand him all day long. But they have most of them have no real interest. They're bought and paid for. They're Luciferians. They're probably bloodline Luciferians. They're part of the Illuminati. They didn't get to that position, most likely, any other way. So, you know, they'll shake his hand, just like that speech he gave to Congress or whatever. not too long ago. And everybody's standing up and clapping for him and all this stuff and glad handing him and all this garbage. And I really would guarantee you the vast majority of those devils would love to see him dead. And we're just flabbergasted that he even got into office. The majority. I'm not saying all, but the majority. So he's, it's an incomprehensible battle.
Yes, it is. I kind of think that because I was involved in the 1985 hijacking of TWA hijacking.
What do you mean involved?
Well, I worked
She was one of the hijackers that she's going to reveal. Just kidding, teasing.
for Captain John Testrake, who was the pilot of the plane that was hijacked in 1985.
Whoa.
And through
When she said I was involved in the hijacking, that didn't sound too good, did it? I was one of the masked bandits that actually took over the plane and commandeered it. Yes, that was me.
that experience, I learned many, many things. And one of the things that I learned was sometimes they, when these refugees, and of course back then they were called immigrants. So when the immigrants were coming into let's say the Kansas City area, because I had an experience in the Kansas City area on one occasion. So these immigrants were brought in, and they were placed in public housing. This was back in the 80s. And it just happened one day that we were over there doing some ministry work through my church, and one of the people that was with me spoke fluent Arabic. He fluent Farsi. And so as we were walking through the public housing area over there, he overheard some men sitting on the hood of a car talking. And it wasn't until we got well past these men that he told me what they said. And what they were talking about was sleeper cells.
And this was when?
This was in the 80s.
Wow.
So if that was going on back in the 80s, what's going on today?
Well, and Hezbollah just announced that they have a complete...
Yeah, like, I remember when I gave a presentation to a church back in Independent Fundamental Baptist Church. I was attended in North Fort Myers, Florida. And the first time I ever spoke before the church on any kind of official capacity, I spoke on this topic. And it was basically research that I had seen, straight from the horse's mouth from these Muslims that, they were going to, one of the ways they were going to attack cities, and this, you have to understand, this was like, the research I was getting went all the way back into the 80s, into the 70s. This is how long they've been building these terrorist cells here. Okay, yes, have they, and we're only hearing about what's been going on lately, but they have had decades to get entrenched. Okay, the enemy has had decades to get entrenched and to build networks and to build all of these things that they're building in order to one day finally attack. One of the things they had talked about was that they were going to be renting these airplanes, like it would be like these private type Cessna airplanes, and they could fly over major freeways and have what they call a Venturi, which I don't know exactly how they were going to mount it, but it was basically like was something that you could put biological agents into and disperse it over large areas like a city or over highways and things of this nature, where you would ensure you were going to have these biological agents like anthrax and only God knows whatever they're going to try to spray on us. And I'm sure they'll have the help of our government doing that. The black part of our government that wants to see us all dead. Where they could fly over cities and do this very easily and release, tons of this stuff over large populated areas and kill maximum amount of people for the minimal amount of effort. They could even go down highways, they said, and take these Venturis and cut holes like in the bottom of vans or cars and basically disperse this stuff on the highways you're going down. If it's like a moderate day and people have their windows down especially, it's going to get sucked up right into the car. You could literally infect, and if these things are contagious, if there's a contagious aspect to these, you could then become a vector for spreading whatever they're going to do. And this is one of the first presentations I ever gave at a Baptist church long time ago. And then I related to how colloidal silver can be an antidote for some of these biological agents. Not all of them, it just depends what type of agent they're dispersing. But if it has a bacterial or a viral component, the colloidal silver can be one of the main things you could use against it. So anyway, let's go further.
Network of sleeper cells here in
Here
the
in the
U.S.
US.
ready for the trigger, and that's beyond the independent ISIS groups and all
Right.
that sort of stuff.
Right.
You know, something you just mentioned, though, what we call these people, how we identify them. They used to be called immigrants.
Right.
Now they're called refugees.
Correct.
And a lot of people don't understand that there's a legal distinction. A refugee, under a UN charter, if they're considered a refugee by the UN, that allows UN peacekeepers to be present wherever UN refugees are.
That's absolutely correct.
Can you kind of talk...
Did you hear that? Because of the status of refugee, even though they're not refugees really at all, they're just coming here to get free stuff and to ultimately rape, steal, kill, and pillage Americans. That's basically the carrot that's been put before them, all in the service of Allah. As long as they have that status of refugee, that gives the UN a right to be here and supposedly police these refugees and have UN, quote, peacekeepers, boots on the ground. So that's a whole other part of the agenda, which gives the United Nations supposed legal reasons to be here on our soil. So this is another reason it's so important for them to pull this off.
Get into that a little bit and the
Yes.
risk that some conspiracy theorists thought we were in, and now we actually find that maybe they weren't so crazy after all?
Well, you know, I would say this to that. St. Louis, interestingly, the city of St. Louis and the county of St. Louis is the only county in Missouri that doesn't have a sheriff. Are you aware of that?
Well, now there's two. It's St. Charles County and St. Louis County.
Right.
And that's where I'm at.
Right. St. Charles County just voted in April of 2014 to no longer have a sheriff.
Yeah.
Okay. And we know that Francis Slay, the mayor of St. Louis, is wanting desperately for St. Louis to be identified as a smart city, a strong city, a sanctuary city, all of the above. You know, he wants these designations on St. Louis.
So this is ground level for evil. When you have devils that are converting cities into this no sheriff, smart cities, sanctuary cities, I mean, those are the places you want to avoid like the plague, because that is ground level for pure evil. That is ground level for what ultimately will become a model for Antichrist and false prophet type of United Nations ruling. That's the model city right there.
Well, those are UN identifiers. Those fall under Agenda 2030. Those fall underneath the Sustainable Development Goals.
Wow.
And so in the United States, we have what are called sheriffs, and sheriffs actually have the highest authority of any county. So if a federal FBI agent comes into the county, the first place they have to go by law, and they do go, is to the local sheriff's office. They have to let them know they're in their county. Well, why is that? Because the sheriff holds the highest authority. The sheriff can arrest, detain, charge anybody in the county that he or she sees fit to do if they're violating the law. Well, if you don't have a sheriff, and let's use St. Louis as our example because they don't have a sheriff, and St. Louis proper and St. Louis County and now St. Charles no longer have a sheriff, and you've got refugees living, which we now know in 2017, 1,200 refugees have been sent to St. Louis City and County.
In 2017.
Uh-huh.
And we're...
And that's one city, 1,200 in 2017. And we're only like a little over 3.5 months into 2017. And those are the ones we know about. What about all the other ones off the books that we don't know about, that are coming in by other means? I mean, this problem is so gigantic, and I just don't think enough emphasis is being put upon this in the alternative media, even the alternative media. This is such a fifth column Trojan horse type of thing that is happening every day under our noses, and there's just virtually no coverage of this. This needs to be something that all the alternative media really needs to take time to focus on, I believe. And I know there's so many issues to focus on. I get that, but it's just the problem is so enormous in scope. and it's so satanic.
Only in March.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you've got 1,200 refugees, and that's just so far this year. That's not counting last year or 2015 or 2014.
Sure.
That's just right now. So you've got 1,200 that we know of for this year so far, and you don't have a sheriff. So who is going to police them, or anybody else for that matter, should anything break out? Well, we have heard that there's been UN peacekeeping vehicles sighted in those counties.
See, and as weird as that might have sounded 5 years ago, if some sort
So in other words, you don't have a sheriff there now. You've got no real high-level authority in that county. They've done away with sheriffs. And you have the refugees here under the auspices of these United Nations refugee resettlement programs, which when they're bringing their refugees in, then they have a right to police them. So therefore, they have a right to have boots on the ground. You see how all of this is ultimately going to end up being justified? Oh, well, we had to do away with the sheriffs because we had this massive wave of these wonderful Muslim immigrants coming in, fleeing whatever. This is the cover story. And we had to have the UN come in because we need our own internal police force, obviously, to pursue them. And then, you go into the whole, well, is America even sovereign anymore? You've got other, law enforcement essentially trumping local law enforcement. Now you got the UN. It's an absolute nightmare in the making, what we're looking at here.
of conspiracy late night talk show sort of rambling. That's absolutely true. Because where there's refugees, there's UN peacekeepers allowed to be.
Right.
And it's not just St. Louis. Joe Biden's son in Delaware worked very hard to eliminate counties with sheriffs. And it's part of that systemic problem where they know what they're after.
Right.
If we can eliminate the sheriff,
Right.
we can eliminate the checks and balances.
That's right. That's right. And we all saw what they did to Sheriff Joe Arpaio down there in Arizona. That man had an illustrious career, and he's no longer the sheriff.
Right. Right.
So they know what they're doing.
Oh, yeah,
and
they
a lot
do.
of big money went into that local sheriff's race.
Right?
Yeah, millions and millions of George Soros alone went into making sure Arpaio didn't get reelected because he was kind of he was a catalyzing figure that a lot of other sheriffs, I believe, looked to as bold as he was and the things that he was saying. He was emboldening other sheriffs, and they don't want that. They want to do away with, I really believe, ultimately, all the sheriffs in the land. And they got to start somewhere. And obviously, Satan has got a foothold now in St. Louis County and in this other county there that she cited. And I hope that Trump would bring in Sheriff Arpaio into his administration in some higher level capacity where he can do more, of what he was trying to do on a local basis there in the Phoenix area, where he could do it more on a national level. And that sheriff from Milwaukee, he's awesome too. There's a lot of really good sheriffs that have got the memo, that have a very, very good idea of what is going on, and they're seeing it firsthand. So anyway, I hope that he would do that, bring them in, because that could be a tremendous asset to his administration.
Well, what about this, though? What about this idea that in these sanctuary cities, you have people who are saying to the federal government, we're going to reject your law, your ordinance, your rules. Part of us says, well, that's good, right? Because we're supposed to have state sovereignty, so I'm kind of for that. But the other part of us says, you're only doing it to endanger us.
Well, I would say to that, I would want to know under the auspices of what are they making that declaration? Because if it's a sanctuary city, they're going to bring in UN protocols and they're going to make those known. There will be no question that they are now suspending, national sovereignty, state sovereignty, and the Constitution. Because people will, when they start pushing their agenda, people are going to push back. And that's when they'll make it known that this is what they're really all about, that you have agreed to this. And so, they have such a way of saying, this was all your idea, remember? This is what you wanted, right?
Yeah, right. Is there anything else you would like to bring up to the American people?
You know, I would say, Josh, in final words, I would say, fight for everything that's within you to maintain your freedom and your liberty. Be vigilant, stay awake, be alert, come to attention. There are very...
Which is what the Bible says to do, to be sober, alert, awake, you know, be vigilant, for your enemy is a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. I mean, this is the enemy coming in, and this has been a decades and decades long processes in so many different ways, the enemy coming in subtly at the beginning and then more emboldened as he gets more of a foothold, seeking to literally just destroy America, just to destroy any part of the world that has any kind of liberty or freedom. That needs to be stripped from humanity in general. Doesn't matter what part of the world you live in. If there's freedom, if there's liberty and these types of things in those areas need to be, I don't know, driven into slavery, essentially. Driven into a serf type culture, into a Hunger Games type of scenarios, like I've said before many times, which is where they really want to bring us. And then ultimately, if Satan had his way, he'd kill everybody. Because, you know, we're created in God's image, so... and that's why the Bible says if those days weren't shortened, there would no flesh survive, essentially, okay? But we're on the winning team as Christians, and the devil knows how it turns out, and he's, you know, he's furious about that, and he's still going to try to fight tooth and nail, him and his fallen angels and devils and demons, in order to, you know, try to thwart God's plans. But it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen.
Aggressive, assertive, nefarious agents all around us. And when you see something that looks a little out of kilter in your town or in your city or in your county, check it out. Go find out. You know, I've become so bold these days where I just go to the zoning office and just ask for documents, or I attend county commission meetings and I observe and I record, and it makes them nervous, you know. But I'll tell you, we're in a time right now that our freedoms are on the line. Our lives are being, you know, they want to inventory, monitor, and control all human activity. That is their stated objective. Well, I don't want to be inventoried, monitored, or controlled, and I don't think many people do. And so when we start to see things coming along that look a little out of kilter, a little off, it's well within our purview, it's within our rights as a U.S. citizen, and more than that, it's our responsibility. It's our Patrick Henry responsibility to go check it out and find out.
And this is why we have to be really careful of playing party politics, too.
Yes.
Because right now we have two parties that are both interested in making government bigger and expanding the police state. Just one wants to make the left side of the building bigger, the other wants to make the right side of the building bigger. So we as patriots, as individuals, have to take that responsibility back.
That's right.
Thank you so much for being brave enough to bring this to the American people and talking to us.
Thank you, Josh, and I'm glad to be here, and I appreciate your invitation.
So there you have it. Told you it was going to make you mad. Now it's up to you to do something about it. Contact your representatives, your governors, just everybody on your name list. Contact them all. Let them know what's really happening with the UN Refugee Resettlement Program. The fact that these people are getting passports, Social Security numbers, that are coming in the middle of the night and getting ran to locations that are undisclosed. All of this is unacceptable. It's happening now. It's the middle of March, so it's not something that happened under an old presidential administration. It's happening under this one. And be careful, even if your state bans the refugee resettlement program, they can come in under Wilson Fish, so you have to be abreast and aware of that situation as well. And share this video everywhere.
Okay, so some really good closing remarks there. I just felt like the more I listened to that interview, I'm like, I really need to just play the majority of this. I skipped some of the parts, but incredibly important information. A lot of the stuff I had no idea of. It was that bad, and hopefully that'll give you a good knowledge base of that subject there. I'm going to finish out with some other statistics regarding the illegal aliens, and then probably wrap it up for today. Because I've got quite a bit of a study to go through, but I'm already way over 2 hours, and this part is probably gonna probably be an hour and a half to an hour and 45 minutes. The next report is the far-left liberal Washington Post, owned by billionaire Jeff Bezos, headlined an article on March 16th stating that immigrants are now canceling their food stamps for fear that Trump will deport them. A short time later, the liberal mouthpiece edited its headline by omitting that immigrants are on food stamps, because a lot of people don't know that, or they don't want people to know that, and rather, meaning these are illegal aliens. Is what they're not immigrants, they're illegal aliens, okay? Again, they're coming in, they're getting all of these benefits, just like these devil Muslim fighting age men that we just talked about, okay? That's where a gigantic part of Social Security is going to, and our tax dollars, and all of these things that Americans have paid into for decades and decades and decades. The ones that are reaping the benefits are the ones that, a lot of the ones that hate our guts and want to see us destroyed, okay? I say that from an American perspective, but that's what we're looking at here. Let's go further here. He edited the headline later by omitting that immigrants are on food stamps and rather blaming President Trump for them going hungry, even though they should have never been here in the first place and they came here illegally. And it says now immigrants are going hungry, so Trump won't deport them. Oh, the humanity. That was the headline there. Bezos quickly changed this headline as it doesn't want you to know, as they don't want you to know that illegals are on benefits paid for by you. So then they just blame everything on Trump. So then they changed the headline to, the headline was, immigrants are now canceling their food stamps for fear Trump will deport them. Then they realized what they did, and they're like, oh, no, let's change it. Immigrants are going hungry, so Trump won't deport them. So it's always this big browbeating, you're evil, you have no compassion, how dare you? While all of these illegal aliens, including the Muslims, are just pouring in. It's unbelievable. Here's some neat statistics. I just got this month from a newsletter that goes out to North Carolinians via email, and it's called NC Fire. And NC Fire members and concerned citizens of North Carolina. I've read you a lot of these statistics. To bring you up to date, 170 illegal aliens have been charged with 592 child rapes and child sexual assaults and indecent liberties with a child in just over the last 10 months in just North Carolina alone. So here's some wonderful fruit of these illegal aliens: 592 child rapes, child sexual assaults, and indecent liberties with a child in just the last 10 months from these wonderful illegal aliens that we've let come in there. And there's virtually no coverage of this at all in local papers. I get the local paper here every once in a while. I'll check it online. I'll check the Charlotte Observer online. There's nothing about this. And not only this, a lot of these rapes are not even reported. A lot of in fact, you could maybe double or triple this figure. They're not even reported. They have to dig so hard to even find these ones. And they've given all these other reasons why a lot of them are never reported and we'll never know about them. So this is a much bigger problem than I'm even reporting on. And this is just for one state. These monthly reports cover a period from May 2016 through February 2017. Every monthly report can be viewed at our website, ncfire.info, so if you want to know more about that. Now let's, again, then we can go to this little part. It says, and this is all along the lines of the illegal alien problem. Sadly, Mexico is beyond a bad neighbor as it relates to our border. By not controlling their side and allowing illegal immigrants and drug traffickers to routinely cross into the USA, and now in California, as I've said, it's just basically come one, come all, thanks to Governor Jerry Brown. The same one that was making sure he could do everything to destroy the Oroville Dam, which they're going to, that's a whole other thing they're going to push for very soon as well when the spring melt comes, as we talked about in the last study. Anyway, by pushing sewage into our waterways, as noted in the web links below. We're going to get into that in a second. And by all the trash dropped by illegal immigrants into our national parks and border areas as illegal aliens cross into the USA in violation of our U.S. immigration laws. Now, let's just look at this a little bit more. First report, Mexican sewage routinely fouling San Diego beaches now and ocean waters. During the 17 days that 140 million 140 million gallons of raw sewage poured from Mexico into the Tijuana River and then into the ocean, fronting several popular South San Diego communities. No Mexican official disclosed the potential health and environmental hazards. They don't care. We're gringos. They don't care about us. You know? I mean, you look at all the wickedness going on in Mexico. I've reported on it over and over again. With the Santa Marta death cult, with the Mexican drug cartels. I mean, it is so black, so dark as far as the black magic that's going on down there. The mass murders. I mean, it is just unbelievable. So this really shouldn't surprise us any. Despite the silence when the spill began on February 6th, some 200,000 people living in South San Diego, Imperial Beach, and Chula Vista knew that there was something amiss. Even a mile away from the Tijuana River, they could smell the eye-watering, throat-burning, overwhelming smell of raw sewage. They'd eventually learned this was the worst sewage spill in the region in a decade. The spill resulted in several miles of beaches being closed for 5 to 6 weeks from the Mexican border north to the city of Coronado. Next report, illegal immigrants trash borderlands with tons of waste. A little known side of the heated Mexican border security issue is that the government workers risk their lives to clean up the huge amounts of trash left by the illegal immigrants in secluded desert areas with rigorous training. I mean, they are beyond pigs. They leave the most disgusting garbage behind, and they could care less, you know. The job is becoming increasingly difficult and dangerous as illegal aliens use more remote paths to avoid stepped up enforcement along the vast U.S.-Mexico border. Each year, illegal immigrants leave behind an estimated 2,000 tons of trash, including soiled diapers, plastic bottles, abandoned vehicles, used condoms in public Arizona lands along the border. And when they rape the women along the way, when the coyotes get the women and they bring them across and they rape them, they'll hang their like undergarments up on trees as like a sign of conquest. That's another thing they do. So it's all kind of just incredible wickedness that goes along with this whole illegal alien smuggling process. Darwin's, it's becoming tougher to clean up the huge mess. These are dangerous areas, Darwin told the panel. These are known areas of illegal immigration, illegal drug trafficking. Darwin was the guy they were interviewing for this. The problem is so severe that the state created a special website dedicated to trash along Arizona's 370-mile border with Mexico. It includes pictures of southern border areas covered with piles of waste, as well as alarming statistics. For instance, the thousands of tons of trash discarded by illegal aliens annually is having a detrimental environmental impact and affecting the area's human health and the economic well-being. Well, they're also, what they do is they go into people that have property, they trash their land, they trash their wells, they threaten them, they kill their livestock, they do all kind of evil stuff. It's like a third world country down there in certain parts, as far as if you're near the border especially. I've played tons of interviews of people that live down there, first-hand accounts. Listed examples include strewn trash in piles, illegal trails and paths, erosion, watershed degradation, damaged infrastructure and property, and loss of vegetation and wildlife. There's also a lot of vandalism, graffiti, and damage to historical archaeological sites. Adding insult to injury, taxpayers pick up the exorbitant tab to clean it up. I mean, everything I talked about today was pure wickedness that was being foisted on the American, law-abiding American populace, and we're forced to pay the bill. I mean, total insanity. Now, I'm going to go ahead and end there. I'm just going to give a quick update. A lot of people wanted to know about the camping trip that we had taken recently, that I had kind of mentioned a little bit in my studies. I don't like to say a lot about that type of stuff ahead of time because, you know, like I said, I've had like witch coven after witch coven after witch coven trying to kill me, and I don't like to give a lot of heads up of where I might be and that type of thing because of that. I'm pretty low key. It's not that I'm afraid of them. It's just that I want to also be wise when I do things. Haven't heard from the last time that we had that rigmarole from a few months back with Jasmine, the black-eyed witch, saying she's gonna astral project into my bedroom and kill me and all this other stuff. Well, that didn't materialize. So, but that's not the first time that's happened. I mean, I've had tons and tons of threats over things like that. And you know what? The Lord Jesus Christ is just greater than it all, period. And I thank God for my listeners that are praying for us. And, without you, I shudder to think where we would be. But we had talked about doing this trip into the Virginia area where there's been all these sightings of these cryptozoological creatures, whether you want to refer, some of them are Bigfoot, things like werewolves, the reptilian, a lot of different sightings, not by just my one listener, James, but by other people, other accounts that I have read other listeners that have reported from that area. And so we went to this one particular park where they had a encounter before, a very, very severe encounter, and it was like last November. My listener James had went there with another gentleman who was, I believe, a Afghanistan war vet, and they had just a horrible encounter with these Bigfoot creatures. The part of the park that they were staying in was actually closed, because there weren't enough people in the park as of yet for them to justify opening it. Because most of the time, when we went in there, and this is the way we wanted it to be, it was very, very light. We wanted to go in when there would be the least amount of people, because we figured that would, as far as if they were going to manifest, if it was the Lord's will, and we were actually to engage these creatures, then the greatest likelihood of that happening would be if there wasn't a lot of other human activity around. And okay, so for the people, before I say anything more though, for the people that say, oh, there's no such thing as Bigfoot and all this other stuff, come on, really? I mean, there have been thousands and thousands and thousands of sightings of these creatures over the decades, okay? Are you telling me that every single sighting was just all made up? There's no merit to any of it. Let me just read you a little bit about this particular subject. Most researchers who study Bigfoot subject will point to the abundance of witnesses as a factor they found most compelling about the mystery when first becoming acquainted with it. Over the course of time, Bigfoot researchers meet with enough eyewitnesses to realize there are indeed many, many eyewitness accounts across the continent who are very credible. Often there are multiple witnesses to a given sighting or encounter. There are, in fact, way too many eyewitnesses for this phenomenon to be purely imaginary. As skeptics assert, with such an abundance of eyewitnesses who are dispersed across the continent and dispersed across the decades, the alternate skeptical explanation that the sightings are the result of hoaxers in the whole or even in large part becomes much less likely. Researchers eventually come to realize that if there are indeed so many credible eyewitnesses across the land, then this species they so consistently and emphatically describe probably exists also. And I'm just going to read you some of the stuff regarding this. This is just kind of a little footnote, some things about this. The mystery behind the sightings of Sasquatches, which is a term interchangeable with Bigfoot, took on a new dimension in the 1960s when Dr. Grover Kantz of Washington State University began examining casts and photos of footprints from various parts of Washington. One of the sets of casts showed anatomical features of an injured foot that were either made by a real upright walking primate or an artist with an expert understanding of primate foot anatomy. Okay? So in other words, it was most likely very real, the things that have been done. They go into some of the footage that has come out. I'm not even going to get into that part. There's all kind of things where they've analyzed that one particular film. The Patterson-Gimlin film is widely regarded as one of the strongest pieces of evidence for the existence of Sasquatches. The footage was obtained in a remote mountains area in Northern California in 1967. The two men involved were Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin. Patterson was a rodeo rider from Yamaika, Washington. He was trying to make a documentary about the Bigfoot mystery when he went down to Northern California with a rental of a 16mm movie camera hearing about the numerous tracks in the valley around Bluff Creek. And this is where he got the footage. The footage has been repeatedly analyzed by scientists over the last 40 years. It has never been proven a hoax. And so we've got that. That's just one of the many, many, many pieces. Most of the native tribes across North America have stories in their oral traditions describing giant hairy figures that look and behave very similar to what Americans and Canadians have described over the last few centuries. James brought up in one of the things that he sent me that these Indians literally worship these creatures like they were gods and sacrificed to them and these types of things. So this is totally part of Indian culture that was never questioned. The tribes are spread across the linguistic groups of different native languages. Every native linguistic group has its own name for these figures. And you're telling me they each Indian group made them up? What possible motivation would they have to hoax Bigfoot encounters before the white man ever even got here? It makes no sense at all. Every native linguistic group has its own name for these figures. They had different names for them, but it was the same thing, basically, suggesting the stories of these figures did not arise all in the same place. They didn't. Sightings continue to happen on certain native reservations in the United States and Canada, those reservations with an abundance of natural food sources. Well, that's, a big boy's got to eat, and Bigfoot are big, and they probably put down a whole bunch of food. There are many examples of recordings attributed to the sounds of Bigfoot, which are distinct from the sounds of other animals. James had described to me all the tree knocking that has went on that he's heard, and then tree knocking that's even on his own property right now that he's dealing with. The whistling sounds that are made, which are very, very distinctive, and that happened in I believe their last encounter and the encounter before that. The whistling sounds. Bigfoots are said to make loud howls and screams at night, as well as wood knocking sounds and rock clacking sounds. The most compelling collection of recordings was obtained in California's Sierra Nevada mountains in the 1970s with the help of a newspaper journalist from Sacramento. Those recordings, called the Sierra Sounds Collection, are widely believed to be authentic recordings of Bigfoots. A few of those recordings captured what sound like a primitive language, which it's also a thing that you hear a lot of if you get close enough to them. Sound recordings have been obtained in eastern states as well, such as states as Ohio, Mississippi, and Florida. And this last one, just see. Okay, beginning in the late 1990s and continuing for the next 10 years, fingerprint expert Jimmy Chillicote in Texas began examining details in track casts obtained in various parts of the country, and meaning they're casting these Bigfoot foot impressions, okay, and he began examining details in these track casts that were obtained in various parts of the country. He noticed distinct dermal ridges in some of the casts. Some of them, nearly microscopic details, showed healed scars where the skin had been previously cut or damaged. And you figure if these things are walking around barefoot all the time, and with the prevalence of, now more so than ever, like broken glass, stuff like that, they're probably going to get their feet cut up from time to time. Some of the casts showed larger longitudinal ridges, which were thought to be dermal ridges originally. Other researchers later demonstrated that those larger longitudinal ridges could have been created inadvertently in the process of pouring the liquefied plaster into the track impression. The more microscopic details of the healed dermal scars, however, were not caused that way. The healed scar patterns tend to be to confirm the authenticity of the tracks in question. So there's all these different, this is just a little Cliff Note version of the proof that these creatures actually exist. Okay, so for somebody to go around and say, oh, there's no, validity to any of this, come on, really? Well, how do you explain the Indian legends? Different tribes describe the same thing. They're all isolated from one another, and they pass it down through their oral and maybe written traditions, and they're all basically saying the same thing. I mean, that by itself is pretty heavy-duty evidence. What motivation would they have had? Were they trying to make an extra buck back in the day before the white man got here? It makes no sense at all. Anyway, so we get there, and we set up camp. We're not in the same place James was in before. In fact, I think we're on the opposite side of the park. This is like a 1,000-acre park. It's big, okay? It's huge. It's right on the Potomac River, or one of the forks of the Potomac River. And we weren't like right up butted against the ocean. We had woods behind us. I don't know how far the ocean was. I think it was behind us, but I'm not 100% sure how far. Anyway, so we get there and set up camp. Introductions are made. I brought my listener, good time, good friend Greg from this area, from the Hickory area. He's the one that went to the Trump rally with me and stuff. And Greg had, and we all had. I mean, we'd fasted some, prayed a lot about it. Just really tried to make sure we were spiritually ready, because we didn't know what we were going to encounter. And so we get there, and then we set up camp. We have the fire going and stuff like that. And basically the first night, what we had agreed to do is pretty much that we would have somebody up at least in the night hours all the time, just to make kind of like guard the camp. Because what had happened last time when they had went is, and I had read this account online, is that was when they had the big problem where these things were actually getting into the camp and walking around the tents and stuff like that. They were never able to get into the tents, because I believe purely because of God's protection. But the fact that they were breaking into the perimeter of the camp was obviously a problem. Okay, so we wanted to avoid that, and if somebody was guarding the camp there to sit up, pray, and that type of thing, hopefully we could avert that. So we prayed a lot the first night. We had a lot of really good fellowship. It was just a really good time. The first night was not near as cold as the second night. The first night, though, right when we got done with one set of prayers, not only did we hear a lot of this whistling off in the distance that they're talking about. I didn't really hear any wood knocks the whole time we were there, but we definitely heard a lot of strange whistling. James was more familiar with that, so he would kind of be able to differentiate on the whistling better. But I'm telling you, man, when we were there that first night, after we got done with the one set of prayers, man, it sounded like 50, no more than 50 yards away, a gigantic tree falling. And there was no wind that night to speak of. I mean, it was just out of nowhere. This tree just fell over. And it made a gigantic racket. And that's typically what you will find in a lot of these accounts of either Bigfoot or these other cryptozoological creatures that are large. When they get agitated, if you're doing something, or maybe even to warn you, they will knock over trees. That's one of the ways that they show they're agitated, or they're warning you. And that happened. Okay, that was undeniable. That was really weird. That was out of like no reason that should have happened. And the second night, I could have kind of understood it, because the second night was freezing. It was in I believe the lower 20s, and it was raining off and on. And well, during the morning it was, especially. I think we had a little bit at night, but it was very windy. But I didn't hear one tree fall at all the second night. Second night was similar, but actually less eventful. We basically the same thing. Prayed as it was getting dark. Came against these things. Whatever we felt led to do prior to this, as far as praying and things of this nature, we did that. I took the watch from 11 until 4 in the morning. And my back was literally to the woods, because the way the fire was oriented, this fire pit, the way that you got the best heat, because it was freezing that night. I mean, I had like I had level 3 thermal underwear on, I had jeans on top of that, and then I had sweatpants on top of that, and I had long socks with shoes, and then I had like level 3 thermals up top, long sleeve, with another shirt on top of that, with another heavy like kind of a fleece shirt jacket type of thing, and then a gigantically heavy like hunting coat on top of that. Some of this gear I'd never wore before. I never, and then like a knit cap, like a mitten type knit cap on my head. Plus I had gloves on, and I was still, if you got right in front of the fire, you were okay, but we had to keep the fire going the whole time. Man, was it cold. Wow, that was the coldest night I have ever spent in my life. low 20s, really, really windy. The sky pretty much cleared up that night. I mean, it was creepy. It was, I mean, I'll tell you right now, it was, and there was no light source. I would basically, the moon was pretty good, so you could see pretty well. But I felt on a couple occasions that night from a spiritual standpoint, just, you know how you get that feeling. And I would just pray, come against it, kind of like the first night. I just really feel like they were not permitted to get near us for one reason or another. That's kind of been the story of my life. When I go out on these things and I go to engage these things that are supposedly very, very, very prevalent, usually if I've done praying and fasting and things of this nature, by the time I get there, I don't know, they're not allowed to manifest. I think it's like nothing is going to be revealed before it's time, that type of thing from God. And I'll say this now, but Taylor told me, I was telling her a little bit about the trip beforehand, and she has a lot of, insight on these types of things. And as she was sitting on the couch, as I was talking to her about this, she said, Dad, she says, and this is before I went, I didn't tell this to anybody at the time, but she says, Dad, I really don't think you're going to see anything when you go out there. I don't think that they're going to be permitted to manifest. I don't think they're going to be permitted to get near you. I just don't think it's going to happen. I hate to say it, but it's probably what's going to happen. And she was right, so, but, that was God's will. So, the bottom line, we had a ton of people praying for us, a lot of intercessors, people were fasting for us, we were covered by the blood of Jesus Christ. And, they just weren't allowed to manifest, is what it boiled down to, is the way it seemed. Had things been differently, had things maybe, I don't know, had we not prepared as much, had we not had people praying and fasting, it probably would have been a very, very different trip. Overall, I'm very glad, though, that we went, that we, were actually able to go to this area, because I've talked a lot about it lately, and it's you're looking at about an hour and a half below Washington, D.C., so you're getting into that northern Virginia area where there's a lot of Freemasonic architecture, a lot of cryptozoological creatures that have been sighted, like Bigfoots, werewolves, reptilians, and all this other stuff. You're getting into Pedophile Central, where you've had tons of kids show up missing. Then you got Washington, D.C., and all the pedophile network there. That's the whole architecture of the whole Washington, D.C. is literally a cult. Based off a big square and compass and pentagrams and all this other stuff that are literally been built in the architecture. It's got the largest obelisk on Earth, which is 666 feet tall from the base to the tip, 555 feet from the ground to the tip, but it goes down another 111 feet underground. So, it's the largest phallus symbol on Earth, which is a gigantic. We're talking about like a witchcraft, occult, evil source lightning rod that you've got there. So if you were expecting any area to probably have a lot of activity, it would be this area. And so, that second night, I got no sleep hardly at all. I gave Greg my tent. I slept in the back of my SUV, and it was horrible. I was freezing. It had to be in the 20s in my cab. And I couldn't get into my sleeping bag because I had so much clothes on, and I was so cramped I couldn't stretch out. I really couldn't get down into the sleeping bag and zip it up. There was just no way. There was not enough room. So I basically slept without a sleeping bag in the back of the SUV, and oh wow, that was the coldest night I ever spent. And then by morning, they were breaking down camp, and I basically crawled out of there with like almost no sleep, and had to make the 6-hour drive back to our area or whatever. But I'm very glad we did it. Everything worked out good. And you never know from a spiritual standpoint, with all the prayers that we were doing and all the prayers and fasting that were going up for us regarding the situation, what was accomplished. You really don't know. You know, it's one of those things you might not even have any idea of until like you get to heaven, and then you can understand from a spiritual realm what actually was accomplished. So that's about all I really have to report back on the trip. No major disasters, no major, a lot of weird sounds though coming from the woods, and that tree crash the first night was undeniable. Oh, and then it was really weird. The one other thing that did happen the first night, when I don't know, I made it to like 5 o'clock, and I'm like, I gotta go to bed now. Sunrise was like 6:30, or maybe it was 4:30, and then I guess James went to bed like a half hour later, and then we were all asleep. So in the morning, evidently, what sounded to be like somebody walked through the camp, and they thought it was a human, but you have to understand there was nobody staying around us at all. I mean, you couldn't even. That was going into Friday, and Thursday night there was hardly any people at all, even in the whole park. And they were like, somebody walked through the camp. Both Greg and James heard it. They walked right by both tents, and I think it both woke them up, and they thought it was the other person. They thought, oh, James thought it was Greg, or maybe me, and Greg thought it was James or me, probably. And then when they had got up, they realized it wasn't. So I don't know what that was about, but it might have had something to do with us all being asleep at the same time. So anyway, praise the Lord. We made it back in one piece, and it was quite an experience, and it was good to. It's good to test out like some of your preps. You know, you get out when you really get out, and it's that cold. I mean, I know it could get a lot colder, but you really see like what it takes to actually live outdoors when it's really cold, and you quickly see that, man, I thought I had this base covered really, really good, and I really didn't have it covered as good as I thought I did. So I guess they've got like level 4 thermals now at Bass Pro Shop, which Greg was or James was talking about getting. It might not be a bad idea. If you live in any kind of cold weather environment and the power ever goes off, or maybe, God forbid, you're out in the wilderness or whatever having to survive, man, I'm telling you, if you don't have enough cold weather clothing, it could kill you. Especially if you can't start a fire. You know, it could kill you. I'm just saying. That was one of the biggest takeaways I got from the whole weekend. And, you know, it was heavy duty, but I'm really glad we got to experience that, because like I said, it's good to know. It's good to know about these different scenarios that you might get put into. So anyway, that's all I have for today. I'll go ahead and close us out in a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, we do thank you for this day and this time you've given us, Lord. I thank you for letting us come together again, Lord, and to look at the subjects that we've looked at. I pray to God that we take away from these teachings what we need to take away from, Lord God, that we would go forth and help other people, God, enlighten other people, ultimately use this type of information to lead people to the Lord. As they see the truth in one area, hopefully they'll see the truth of the Lord Jesus Christ and the Word of God. I pray, God, that you forgive us for any and all sins that we've committed, as we forgive those who have sinned against us, and that the words of our mouth and the meditations of our heart will be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer, and that you cleanse us from presumptuous sins and secret faults, that they would not have dominion over us, Lord. I pray to God you expose all these wicked, nefarious plans of the devil, God, that we've covered today, the pedophile networks, Lord God, the George Soros networks, the Illuminati, the George Bushes, the Clintons, Lord, the Obamas, all the wicked things that the Congress and the Senate and the governors in Hollywood are trying to do, God. I pray to God all their wicked works and their deeds be exposed, and that you stop them, Lord God, from implementing their wicked, evil plans. I just pray, God, you dispatch legions of angels toward this, God, that they would intervene, God, regarding these matters, Lord, and that you would get the victory. We ask all these things, Lord, in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, we pray. Amen.